Hello friends. Welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 unlocked the ultimate Celles. Teal Omnitrix and got Harem of Charmcaster, Ester and Julie. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Celestial Awakening. The unrelenting Peruvian sun beat down on the archaeological site as Ben Tennyson wiped sweat from his brow. 6 years of galactic heroism had hardened his once lanky frame into lean muscle, evident even beneath his dirt-smeared expedition gear. He'd traded his adolescent jacket for a more practical utility vest, though he'd stubbornly kept the familiar green and black color scheme. The Omnitrix, sleeker now after Azimuth's latest update, gleamed on his wrist like a trusted old friend. Anything interesting over there, Tennyson? Or are you just admiring your reflection in that artifact again? Kai Green's voice carried across the excavation, tinged with the good-natured rivalry they'd developed since reconnecting 3 months ago. Ben smiled despite his exhaustion. Very funny. And for your information, I think I've found something. He brushed away centuries of dirt from a metallic object embedded in the ancient temple wall. It wasn't the pre-Incan artifact they'd been searching for, this was something else entirely. Kai crossed the site with practiced ease, her archaeological toolkit jingling softly against her hip. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and the years had only sharpened her observant eyes and confident demeanor. She crouched beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "That's definitely not indigenous," she murmured, producing a small brush to delicately clear more sediment. "The metallurgy is unlike anything I've seen on Earth. The etching pattern reminds me of Galvan work, but more elaborate somehow." Ben leaned closer. "Yeah, but even Azimuth's tech doesn't have this, whatever this is." He gestured toward what appeared to be crystalline filaments running through the metal-like luminous veins. The object was roughly the size of his palm, a hexagonal disc with concentric rings surrounding a central depression. Strange symbols adorned its edges, faintly pulsing with a blue-green glow that intensified as Ben's Omnitrix drew near. "Careful," Kai cautioned. But curiosity had already won the silent battle with her scientific caution. "These markings, they're similar to those found on that cosmic map we recovered in Azerbaijan last year." "You think it predates Azimuth's people?" Ben asked, feeling a familiar tingle of excitement that usually preceded trouble of the universe-threatening variety. "Possible." The Contemplaja theorized that a precursor race, they called them the Celestials, created the first models for genetic manipulation technology. Kai's voice took on the rapid-fire quality it always did when she accessed her mental encyclopedia of cosmic archaeology. "If this is one of their artifacts." The disk suddenly flared to life, its glow intensifying to painful brightness. Ben instinctively shielded his eyes, but not before noticing how the symbols around the edge had begun to rotate, aligning themselves in new configurations. "Ben." Kai's voice sounded distant despite her proximity. "Your Omnitrix." His familiar device was responding, its own green glow pulsing in perfect counter-rhythm to the artifact. The sensation started as warmth, then escalated rapidly into searing heat. "It's never done this before," Ben gritted through clenched teeth. The pain was becoming unbearable, yet somehow, he couldn't pull his arm away. "We need to separate you from that thing, now." Kai reached for his arm but recoiled when a spark of energy leapt between them. The temple chamber began to tremble, ancient dust cascading from the ceiling. The artifact lifted from the wall, hovering between them for a suspended moment before shooting toward the Omnitrix with magnetic certainty. "This is going to hurt," Ben managed, bracing himself. The collision sent a shockwave through the chamber that knocked both of them backward. Ben fell. Something fundamentally different happening. Not the familiar transformation sequence but something deeper, as though the Omnitrix itself was being rewritten at its core. When the light subsided, the artifact had vanished. But the Omnitrix had changed. The familiar green and black design remained, but now intricate crystalline patterns wove through its structure, and the display interface showed symbols he'd never seen before. "Ben." Kai was at his side, helping him sit up. "Are you okay? What just happened?" He stared at the device, feeling strange new energies coursing through it into his body. "I think it upgraded, or merged with that artifact somehow." He rotated his wrist, examining the changed interface. "Feels different. More connected to everything. Kai's archaeological training immediately asserted itself despite her concern. We need to document this, run tests, contact Azimuth. A low rumble interrupted her, but this wasn't falling debris. Something was moving through the walls, no, through the very fabric of space adjacent to the walls. The air rippled, and 3 humanoid figures stepped into existence. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs, and skin that reflected light like burnished copper. Their eyes, 3 on each face, arranged in a triangle, glowed with the same blue-green energy Ben had seen in the artifact. They wore no obvious chronology but seemed to phase slightly in and out of solidity with each movement. Chronosian scouts, Kai whispered, recognition and dread mingling in her voice. I've seen renderings in ancient texts, but they were thought to be mythical. Quote, the central figure spoke, its voice resonating not through air but directly into their minds. Omnitrix wielder, you have activated the celestial key. This constitutes temporal interference of the highest order. Ben rose to his feet, instinctively positioning himself between the entities and Kai. Look, I don't know what this celestial key thing is, but if you're here for trouble. The consequence is dissolution, the entity continued as if Ben hadn't spoken. Your timeline will be excised. Yeah, that sounds like trouble. Ben's hand moved to the Omnitrix. Finding the interface had completely reconfigured. The familiar transformation selection was replaced by something more fluid, alien silhouettes flowing into one another rather than discreetly separated. The lead Chronosian raised a hand, and space itself began to distort. The very air seemed to age and decay around them, stone crumbling into dust wherever the distortion passed. Ben slammed his hand down on the Omnitrix, hoping his muscle memory would compensate for the new interface. The transformation began, but immediately felt different, more complete somehow. The familiar green flash was now interlaced with threads of cosmic blue. When it cleared, he wasn't just heat blast, he was something more. His typical flame form now contained swirling galaxies within its fire, and each movement left traces of stellar matter hanging in the air. Whoa, Ben's voice echoed with solar flares and cosmic wind. This is definitely new. The Chronosians paused, their trio of eyes widening simultaneously. Impossible. The celestial templates were expunged from all derivative technologies. Ben barely had time to contemplate this before the lead scout sent another wave of temporal distortion hurtling toward him. Acting on instinct, he generated a counterwave of stellar fire, not the typical heat blast flames, but something that burned with the intensity of newborn stars. The two forces collided, sending a concussive blast through the temple. Ancient stones that had stood for millennia began to collapse. Kai, get out, Ben shouted, the cosmic resonance of his voice shaking loose more debris. I'm not leaving you, she called back, already pulling archaeological scanning equipment from her pack. This is first contact with a supposedly mythical species. Not the time for field notes. Ben launched himself toward the nearest Chronosian, discovering that this enhanced form could move with the speed of light itself. He connected with a blow that sent the entity spiraling through several stone walls. The other two scouts coordinated their attack, creating a temporal vortex that began to age everything within it rapidly. Ben felt his enhanced form being pulled into accelerated entropy, flames dimming as years passed in seconds. In desperation, he reached for a new ability, something he'd never tried with Heat Blast before. The cosmic energy within his flames responded, collapsing inward before exploding outward in a miniature supernova that disrupted the temporal field. The shockwave knocked the Chronosians backward, their phasing ability momentarily disrupted. They flickered in and out of solidity, their copper skin dulling. The wielder has partial celestial access, one communicated to the others. Protocol dictates immediate escalation. Escalation doesn't sound good, Ben muttered. Then called to Kai, who was incredibly still taking readings. Seriously, we need to go now. A familiar voice cut through the chaos, one Ben hadn't heard in years. Motu's Interceptus. A wave of magenta energy swept through the chamber, freezing the Chronosians in place mid-gesture. Standing in what remained of the temple entrance was a figure Ben recognized immediately. Despite the changes time had wrought, Charmcaster, or Hope, as she now preferred, stood with one hand extended, arcane symbols circling her arm. Gone was the gothic teenager with revenge in her eyes. In her place stood a confident sorceress, her silver hair now styled in an elegant undercut, her attire a modern take on traditional mystical garb. The facial markings she now bore spoke of mastery over magical disciplines that few humans had ever achieved. When I felt that magical disturbance, I should have known it would be you, Tennyson. Despite her words, there was no malice in her tone, just wry amusement and something else, professional interest. Charmcaster. Ben's surprise momentarily disrupted his transformation, causing the cosmic flames to flicker. It's Hope now, she corrected, maintaining her spell with one hand while examining the temple with analytical eyes. And whatever you've done this time has torn a hole through at least 7 mystical dimensions. The Chronosians don't leave their temporal observation realm unless something catastrophic has occurred. That would be this, Kai said, gesturing to Ben's transformed state while keeping her distance from Hope. Their last encounter years ago hadn't exactly been friendly. Hope's eyes widened slightly as she truly registered Ben's enhanced form. That's not standard pyronite physiology. Your flames contain actual stellar material. She approached, magical sensors clearly at work behind her eyes. What have you gotten yourself into this time, Ben? Before he could answer, her spell began to flicker. The Chronosians were breaking free, their temporal nature allowing them to accelerate through the magical binding. Explanations later, Hope said, already weaving a more complex spell pattern. Can you still access your other transformations? Ben nodded, though uncertainty flickered across his cosmically infused face. I think so, but they might all be different now. Try Summit, Hing with dimensional phasing capabilities. Match their frequency. Her hands were a blur of motion as she reinforced her containment spell. Kai, I assume you have dimensional anchors in that archaeological kit of yours. Kai looked surprised that Hope remembered her name, much less her standard equipment. 3, but they're calibrated for artifact preservation, not containing temporal entities. They'll do. Set them in a triangulation pattern. Hope's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed in magical crises. Ben hit the Omnitrix symbol on his chest, cycling through the new interface until he found something that resembled Big Chill. The transformation was instantaneous, and just as before, dramatically enhanced. Where Big Chill had been a phantom-like moth creature with ice powers, this version existed partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously. His wings were tears in reality, showing glimpses of other realms, and frost formed not from cold but from the slowing of time itself around him. Ultimate Big Chill, he wondered aloud, his voice echoing from several dimensions at once. More than ultimate, Hope observed, her spell momentarily stabilizing. That's celestial level enhancement. The Celestials were said to have created the original templates for all transformation technologies. The Chronosians broke free with a pulse of temporal energy that shattered Hope's spell. They immediately recognized the new threat Ben posed in this form. Cease manifestation, the leader demanded. The celestial key is forbidden to lesser beings. It disrupts the ordained flow of causality. Yeah, I get that a lot about my watch. Ben phased into the same partial dimension as the scouts, discovering he could now perceive their true forms, not the humanoid projections visible in normal space, but complex temporal constructs existing across multiple timelines simultaneously. The fight that followed was unlike any Ben had experienced before. He and the Chronosians phased between dimensions, their conflict leaving reality warping aftereffects wherever they clashed. Ben discovered that this enhanced Big Chill could not only freeze objects but temporarily freeze time around them. Hope worked frantically below, directing Kai in setting up a containment field using the archaeological dimensional anchors supplemented with her own magic. Her hands wove complex patterns in the air, magenta energy forming precise geometric structures. Almost. Got it, she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead from the exertion. Ben, drive them toward the center of the chamber on my mark. Ben acknowledged with a nod that transcended dimensions. He maneuvered through the battle, using his new temporal freezing abilities to herd the increasingly desperate Chronosians toward the spot Hope had indicated. Now, Hope shouted, completing her spell with a final gesture. Ben released a wave of dimensional frost that forced the scouts into normal Spock. Just as Hope activated the containment field. The combination of archaeological technology and mystical energy created a perfect temporal prison, a bubble where time itself stood still. The Chronosians froze in place. Their copper bodies locked between phases. They would remain that way until the spell was broken. Ben transformed back to human form, stumbling slightly as the enhanced power left him. The Omnitrix on his wrist pulsed with new energy, the crystalline veins now fully integrated into its structure. That was, he began, then realized he didn't have words for what had just happened. Fascinating, Kai finished, already scanning the contained chronogens with her equipment. Dangerous, Hope corrected, approaching Ben with professional concern. Let me see the Omnitrix. She didn't wait for permission. Taking his wrist in her hands. Her touch was cool against his skin, her fingers tracing the new patterns on the device with scholarly precision. Ben noticed faint magi, Cal symbols tattooed across her knuckles, protection wards, if he remembered his limited magical education correctly. This is celestial technology, she confirmed, eyes narrowing. The grimoire of A.R. Shimada mentioned them, beings who existed beyond conventional time and space, who created the templates for all transformative magic and technology in the universe. So this, Ben looked down at the changed Omnitrix. As some kind of super upgrade. More like an evolutionary reversion, Hope replied. The original, most powerful version of what eventually became diluted into technologies like the Omnitrix. Her eyes met his, serious and intense. The Celestials were said to have hidden their technology because it was too powerful. It allowed the user to not just transform into other species, but to access their ultimate evolutionary potential instantly. Kai joined them, her scanner still collecting data. That would explain the enhancements to his transformations. But why would the chronogens respond so aggressively? According to legend, they merely observe temporal events, not intervene. Unless something threatens the timeline itself, Hope said grimly. The celestial key, why? I'm guessing is what merged with your Omnitrix, was supposedly locked away because it disrupted the natural progression of evolution across the universe. Ben flexed his fingers, feeling new energy coursing through him even in human form. So basically, I've got the most powerful version of the Omnitrix ever, and it's going to make the time police very unhappy. That's simplifying it considerably, but essentially correct. Hope finally released his wrist, though her gaze remained fixed on the modified device. The containment field won't hold them forever. We need to move, preferably to somewhere I can establish better magical defenses. My research facility is near Lima, Kai offered, already packing her equipment with practiced efficiency. It has alien tech shielding and a secure vault for artifacts. Hope shook her head. Not secure enough for this. We need a place with natural magical properties that can help mask the celestial energy signature. She hesitated, then added, my sanctum in the Black Hills would work. It's built over a convergence of ley lines. Ben and Kai exchanged surprised glances. Hope wasn't known for inviting anyone to her private magical domains. That's generous, Ben said carefully, wondering what had changed in the years since they'd last crossed paths. Hope gave him a look that was both amused and exasperated. Don't mistake necessity for hospitality, Tennyson. Whatever's happened to your Omnitrix is sending ripples through every magical dimension. If more chronogens come, or worse, if they alert their temporous superiors, we'll need every advantage. The temple gave an ominous groan, centuries-old stone finally giving way after the dimensional battle. Dust and debris began raining down more heavily. Time to go, Ben said, reaching for the Omnitrix. I can fly us out. No, Hope interrupted sharply. No more transformations until we understand what we're dealing with. Each use of the celestial Omnitrix sends out a pulse that can be tracked. She produced a small purple crystal from a pouch at her waist. This will be less conspicuous. Before either could object, she crushed the crystal in her hand, releasing a cloud of magenta smoke that enveloped all three of them. Ben felt the distinctive disorientation of magical teleportation, similar to a null void projector but somehow more organic, as though reality itself was bending rather than breaking. When the smoke cleared, they stood in a circular chamber hewn from natural rock, illuminated by crystals that glowed with a soft white light. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient tomes and artifacts. A large circular table dominated the center, covered in maps, scrolls, and what appeared to be magical monitoring equipment. Welcome to my sanctum, Hope said with a small gesture. Try not to touch anything that looks like it might eat you. Ben did a slow turn, taking in the space. It was both exactly what he would have expected from Charmcaster, mystical, slightly gothic, meticulously organized, and surprisingly modern, with holographic displays and what appeared to be a fusion of technology and magic throughout. Nice place, he offered, noting the subtle defensive enchantments woven into the very walls. Very. You. Hope's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. I'll take that as a compliment. She moved to the central table, waving a hand to clear space. Put your arm here. I need to examine the Omnitrix more thoroughly. Kai was already circling the chamber, her archaeologist's eye cataloging everything. These texts, some of them are from civilizations thought to be extinct for millennia. Most magical knowledge doesn't conveniently end up in museums, Hope replied dryly. Now, Ben, the arm, please. Ben complied, resting his arm on the table. Hope produced several crystals from various containers, arranging them around the Omnitrix in a pattern that seemed to follow the constellations. She murmured incantations in a language that made Ben's ears feel like they were trying to fold in on themselves. So, he ventured as she worked, archaeological consultant now. That's new. Hope didn't look up from her work, but her response was less dismissive than it might once have been. I specialize in magical artifacts and dimensional anomalies. Kai's expedition uncovered a fragment of bezel technology last year. I was called in to contain it before it reversed gravity across 3 states. That would have been messy, Ben acknowledged. I've been doing some consulting work too, Mo. Streetly off-world stuff for the plumbers when they encounter species or tech they can't identify. I know, Hope replied, adjusting one of the crystals. Your reputation has grown. They say you've matured. Trying to sound less surprised might help the compliment land better, Ben noted with a hint of his old humor. This time she did smile, briefly. Old habits. The crystals began to glow, projecting a complex 3-dimensional model of the Omnitrix's internal structure above the table. What had once been relatively straightforward Galvan technology now appeared infused with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy. Fascinating, Hope murmured, manipulating the hologram with practiced gestures. The celestial key didn't just attach to the Omnitrix, it's rewriting it at a fundamental level. Accessing capabilities that were always theoretically possible but locked away. Is it dangerous? Kai asked, joining them at the table, her initial wariness of Hope temporarily set aside in favor of scientific curiosity. Extraordinarily, Hope confirmed, but not in the way you might think. It's not unstable, quite the opposite. It's too stable, too perfect. She pointed to specific areas of the hologram. These enhancements aren't just making the transformations more powerful, they're optimizing them beyond their natural evolutionary paths. Which is why the Chronogens showed up, Ben realized. It's changing potential futures. Hope nodded, impressed despite herself. Exactly. The Chronogens observe the natural flow of time and evolution. The celestial technology disrupts that flow by actualizing potential futures immediately. So what happens now? Kai asked, her practical nature asserting itself. The Chronogens know where and when the celestial key was activated. They'll send more forces, and they're just the beginning, Hope added grimly. If the legends are true, the Celestials had enemies, beings who believed such power should remain theoretical rather than actual. Ben looked down at the changed Omnitrix, feeling its new energy pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. Can we remove it? Separate the key from the Omnitrix? Hope's expression grew serious. Not without potentially catastrophic consequences. The integration process appears complete. The key is now a fundamental part of the Omnitrix's operating system. She hesitated, then added, and frankly, I'm not sure we should try. Both Ben and Kai looked at her in surprise. The celestial key is quite possibly the most powerful artifact in this dimension, Hope explained, her eyes on the holographic display. In the right hands, it could be used to address threats that have previously been beyond our capabilities. In the right hands, Ben repeated, studying her face. And you think those are mine? Hope met his gaze directly. 6 years ago, I wouldn't have. Now, she shrugged. You've proven yourself a capable wielder of the regular Omnitrix. And more importantly, they demonstrated something rare among beings with power, restraint. Coming from a former enemy, the assessment carried surprising weight. Ben found himself momentarily speechless. Kai filled the silence. If we're keeping it, then we need to understand it better. The enhanced transformations, the evolutionary optimizations, we need to catalog what's changed. Agreed, Hope said, turning back to her instruments. But carefully, each transformation sends out a dimensional pulse that. A series of alarms suddenly blared throughout the sanctum. Red light flooded the chamber, and several of Hope's magical monitoring crystals turned a deep crimson. Too late, she muttered, rushing to a larger crystal sphere on a pedestal. We've got multiple dimensional breaches forming, not Chronosian signatures. Something else. The air in the chamber began to distort, rippling like heat waves over desert sand. Unlike the clean phasing of the Chronosians, these distortions seemed jagged, forced. Whatever's coming isn't using natural dimensional transit, Hope said, her hands already weaving protective spells. They're tearing through. The first breach fully formed near the chamber entrance, agged hole in reality that pulsed with sickly yellow energy. Through it stepped a figure that made both Hope and Ben tense immediately. Dr. Psychobos, or rather, a version of him. This one stood taller than the cerebrocrustacean they knew, his exoskeleton reinforced with cybernetic enhancements that pulsed with the same yellow energy as the portal. Most disturbing was his cranial shell, which appeared to have been expanded to house additional brain matter, giving him a grotesquely enlarged appearance. Ben Tennyson, he stuttered, though the familiar speech impediment seemed intentional now rather than involuntary. How predictable that you would be the one to activate the celestial key. Across every timeline, your blundering into power remains ACC constant. Dr. Psychobos, Ben replied, instinctively stepping forward. You're looking different. Psychobos Prime, the creature corrected. I have transcended my limited singular existence. This form incorporates the neural matter of 17 variant Psychobos entities from across the multiverse. More breaches began to form around the chamber, each disgorging mechanical drones that bore the distinctive design hallmarks of cerebrocrustacean technology. The sanctum's defenses are failing, Hope warned, her hands glowing with magical energy. Something's neutralizing the ley line convergence. Of course, Psychobos Prime said with malevolent satisfaction. Did you think I wouldn't account for your pathetic magical advantages? My dimensional harmonic disruptors are specifically calibrated to negate mystical energy fields. Ben reached for the Omnitrix, but hesitated, remembering Hope's warning about each transformation sending out a traceable pulse. Too late for CC caution, Psychobos Prime taunted. Noting Ben's hesitation, the celestial key's activation has already alerted every power in the multiverse to its presence. The only question now is who will claim it first. Not you, Ben decided. Activating the Omnitrix, the new interface responded to his thoughts more than his physical interaction, cycling through options before settling on a form. The transformation was immediate and unlike anything he'd experienced before. Where once he would have become Diamondhead, now he became something far beyond, a crystalline being composed of what appeared to be living light. Chi refracted through perfect geometric forms. Each movement sent prismatic colors cascading through the chamber. Celestial Diamondhead, Ben's voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that made the very air vibrate. Or maybe, Prism, Psychobos Prime chittered with what might have been delight. Magnificent. The celestial enhancement process is even more CC complete than my calculations suggested. I'd be flattered if you weren't trying to kill me, Ben replied, discovering that this form could project not just crystal shards but concentrated beams of energy that phased between states of matter. Hope had already engaged several of the drones, her magic proving effective against their technology despite the dimensional disruptors. These aren't just attack drones, they're gathering data on your transformation. Kai had taken cover behind the central table, but not out of cowardice. She'd retrieved equipment from her pack and was rapidly assembling what looked like a modified pulse rifle. Hope, can you channel a containment spell through a directed energy weapon? Theoretically, Hope called back, deflecting a drone's attack with a magical shield. But I'd need a focus. Use this. Kai tossed her a small crystal artifact, one of the very objects they'd been excavating in Peru. Hope caught it one-handed, immediately recognizing its potential. With her free hand, she traced complex sigils in the air, channeling energy into the crystal which began to glow with increasing intensity. Meanwhile, Ben discovered that his enhanced Diamondhead form could manipulate not Ust crystal but the very structure of matter around him. As Psychobos Prime launched a neural electricity attack, Ben reconstructed the air molecules between them into a crystalline lattice that absorbed and redirected the energy. Impossible, Psychobos Prime exclaimed. That level of matter manipulation requires celestial technology. Ben finished for him, pressing his advantage. Which me wonder how you knew about it in the first place. The enhanced cerebrocrustacean scuttled backward, his additional brain matter pulsing with agitation. The Celestials are merely obscure to PP primitives like you. To a superior intellect, their legacy is an open book. Right, Ben replied, forming a crystalline shield to deflect another attack. And I'm guessing you just happened to have dimensional breach technology ready to go when the key activated. Your insinuation that I was waiting for this event is correct, Psychobos Prime admitted with surprising candor. Though I had calculated its occurrence in a different timeline. Your tendency to disrupt PP probability calculations remains irritating. Hope had finished her spell, the crystal now glowing with blinding intensity. Kai fitted the crystal into her modified weapon, aimed carefully, and fired. Instead of an energy blast, the weapon projected a concentrated beam of magenta light that expanded into a dome around Psychobos Prime and his remaining drones. The air within the dome shimmered and then solidified, trapping them in what appeared to be amber-like stasis. That won't hold him long, Hope cautioned, already gathering her essential items from around the chamber. His dimensional technology will eventually counteract the spell. Ben reverted to human form, the transformation release ending a cascade of prismatic energy throughout the room before settling back into the Omnitrix. So we're running. Strategic relocation, Hope corrected, tossing him a bag to fill with select books she pointed to. We need to understand what we're dealing with before more enemies arrive. Kai was already packing her equipment, efficiency born from years of rapid archaeological site evacuations. We need to contact Azimuth. If anyone would know about celestial technology. He's gone off-grid, Ben interrupted, gathering the books Hope indicated. Something about a fundamental breakthrough in pan-dimensional mathematics. He's been completely incommunicado for months. Convenient, Hope muttered, securing several magical artifacts in a dimensional pocket. The stasis field around Psychobos Prime began to flicker, fracture lines appearing in its surface. Time to go, Ben said, reaching again for the Omnitrix. Hope shook her head sharply. No transformations unless absolutely necessary. Each use sends out another pulse. She produced another teleportation crystal, larger than the first. This will take us to my secondary location. You just happen to have a backup magical sanctum? Ben asked, impressed despite the circumstances. Hope's expression was unreadable. I've learned to prepare for catastrophic interventions from people like you, Tennyson. Before Ben could respond to that ambiguous statement, she crushed the crystal. Purple smoke enveloped them once more, and the sensation of reality folding around them intensified just as Psychobos Prime broke free from the stasis field with a rage-filled screech. They rematerialized in what appeared to be an abandoned observatory. The domed ceiling was partially open to the night sky, revealing unfamiliar constellations. Ancient astronomical equipment had been repurposed and enhanced with magical components, creating a hybrid of science and sorcery that somehow felt perfectly balanced. Where are we? Kai asked, taking in their new surroundings. The Chilean Andes, Hope replied, immediately moving to activate defensive measures around the perimeter. This observatory was built by a 19th-century astronomer, who accidentally made contact with beings from Legerdemain. The site retains dimensional properties that help mask magical signatures. Ben set down the bag of books, feeling the Omnitrix pulse with renewed energy. It keeps doing that, like it's trying to tell me something. Hope paused in her defensive preparations, approaching him with cautious interest. The celestial technology is semi-sentient according to the legends. It might be attempting to communicate. Great, Ben sighed, just what I need. Another voice in my head telling me what to do. At least this one might actually know what it's talking about. Hope replied with a hint of her old sarcasm. Kai had already set up her scanning equipment, creating a makeshift research station on an old astronomical table. The energy signature is stabilizing. Whatever the merger process was, it seems to be complete. Hope joined her, examining the readings. The celestial patterns are fully integrated now. These readouts remind me of the harmonic signatures used in high-level transmutation spells. In English, Ben asked, though he had a much better understanding of magical terminology than he once did. It means, Hope explained with forced patience, that the transformations aren't just cosmetically enhanced. They're fundamentally different, accessing aspects of the species that exist across multiple dimensions and timelines simultaneously. Like seeing not just what the alien is, but what it could be, Kai added, her scientific mind grasping the concept quickly. Exactly, Hope confirmed, looking genuinely impressed with Kai's insight. Ben flexed his hand, feeling the Omnitrix respond to even this subtle movement. So instead of turning into the aliens Azimuth programmed, I'm turning into, what, their ideal forms. More than ideal, Hope corrected. Ultimate forms exist within the parameters of natural evolution, just accelerated. What you're accessing appears to be beyond evolution, potential T exists outside conventional dimensional constraints. Their theoretical discussion was interrupted by a sudden alert from Kai's equipment. One of her scanners was detecting approaching energy signatures. Multiple signals, she reported grimly, different from both the Chronosians and Psychobos's technology. These are, I don't recognize this pattern. Hope moved to one of the repurposed telescopes, adjusting it to track the approaching signatures. What she saw made her pale slightly. Maltruant's temporal beasts, she said, her voice tight. I've only seen references to them in the darkest grimoires. They hunt across timelines, devouring anomalies. And I'm guessing the celestial Omnitrix qualifies as a pretty big anomaly, Ben said, moving to peer through the telescope himself. What he saw sent a chill through him. Approaching across the mountainous terrain were creatures that defied conventional description. They moved like predatory animals but seemed composed of constantly shifting temporal energy. Their forms simultaneously existing and dissolving with each movement. How do we fight those? He asked, the question directed at both women. Conventional weapons would be useless, Kai said, already modifying her equipment. They don't fully exist in our timeline. And magic alone won't be enough, Hope added, her expression grim. They were specifically created to hunt magical anomalies. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix, its new configuration pulsing with increasing frequency. Then we combine all three, technology, magic, and whatever this is. Hope and Kai exchanged glances. A moment of wordless communication passing between the former rivals that spoke volumes about how their relationship had evolved. It could work, Hope acknowledged. The Celeste, IAL transformations might be able to interact with them on their own temporal level. And if we channeled it through a focused containment field, Kai continued, we might be able to stabilize them long enough to banish them. I'm hearing a lot of might and could, Ben noted, though there was no fear in his voice, just the familiar determination that had carried him through countless seemingly impossible situations. Welcome to the intersection of experimental archaeology, theoretical magic, and extinct alien technology, Hope replied with dark humor. Certainty costs extra. They worked quickly, Kai repurposing her archaeological scanning equipment while Hope prepared a containment spell that drew power from the observatory's unique dimensional properties. Ben studied the Omnitrix, trying to understand its new interface through intuition rather than analysis. The temporal beasts were getting closer, their approach distorting reality around them. Plants aged and died, then reversed to seeds. Then aged again in their wake. Rocks eroded to sand, then reconstituted. The very air seemed to shimmer with temporal instability. They'll be here in minutes, Kai reported, finalizing adjustments to her equipment. The containment field will only work if they're all in range simultaneously. I can handle that part, Ben said, finally selecting a transformation that felt right. The Omnitrix responded immediately, the transformation more fluid and natural than ever before. Where XLR-8 had once stood, now existed a being that seemed composed of pure velocity. His form was sleek and aerodynamic, but also partially phased into what appeared to be the timestream itself. Contrails of temporal energy followed his slightest movement, and when he spoke, his words arrived before he finished saying them. Velocity, he named himself, his voice echoing from both past and future simultaneously. This feels incredible. Focus, Ben, Hope cautioned, though she couldn't hide her fascination with the transformed state. The temporal beasts can track you through timestreams. Don't engage them directly, Just lead them here. Got it, he replied, and was gone before the words fully formed, leaving only a ripple in reality to mark his passage. Moving at this enhanced speed was unlike anything Ben had experienced before. Standard XLR-8 velocity was impressive, but this form existed partially within the temporal dimension itself, allowing him to perceive time as another axis of movement. The mountainside blurred around him as he located the approaching temporal beasts. They sensed him immediately, their hunt forms shifting toward pursuit configuration. Ben allowed them to detect him fully, then began leading them in a precise pattern back toward the observatory. The beasts followed, reality fluctuating violently in their wake. Inside the observatory, Hope and Kai completed their preparations, the hybrid of technology and magic humming with potential energy. Ready? Hope asked, her hands already glowing with magenta energy. Kai nodded, her finger on the activation switch. Ready. Let's hope Ben times this perfectly. Timing is literally his thing right now. Hope replied with a confidence that suggested more faith in Ben's abilities than she might once have admitted to. Outside, Ben circled the beasts in tightening spirals, using his temporal nature to stay just ahead of their grasp while directing their pursuit exactly where he wanted them. When all 5 creatures were perfectly positioned, he accelerated toward the observatory at maximum velocity. Now, he called as he passed through the observatory dome, his enhanced speed carrying him safely past the containment zone. Hope and Kai activated their devices simultaneously. A field of energy, part magical, part technological, expanded outward, engulfing the temporal beasts just as they converged on the spot where Ben had been. The creatures howled with sounds that existed outside conventional frequency ranges, their forms struggling against the containment. It's working, Kai confirmed, monitoring the readings. Their temporal signatures are stabilizing. Hope began the second phase, an ancient incantation that caused the air within the containment field to glow with symbols from no earthly language. Celestial script, she explained between words of power. The O-N-L-Y thing that can truly bind temporal entities. Ben transformed back to human form, watching in fascination as the beasts gradually solidified into more concrete shapes, still alien and terrifying, but now bound to a single point in time. Where did you learn celestial script? He asked Hope, genuinely impressed. I didn't, she replied without breaking her concentration. The spell is Adaptin G itself, drawing knowledge from the celestial key in your Omnitrix. The connection between the containment field and the Omnitrix became visible then, thin filaments of energy that linked the transfo RMED beasts to the device on Ben's wrist. He could feel the connection, a strange resonance that seemed to whisper knowledge directly into his mind. They're not just Maltruant's creations, he said, the information coming to him without conscious thought. They're failed experiments, attempts to harness celestial technology that went wrong. Hope's eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her focus on the spell. That would explain their temporal instability. And why they're drawn to the celestial key, Kai added, adjusting her equipment to strengthen the containment field. They're trying to stabilize themselves. The beasts had ceased their struggle, now watching Ben with what appeared to be recognition in their multifaceted eyes. The largest of them made a sound, not a roar this time, but something almost like speech. Celestial, it seemed to say, the word distorted through its temporal nature. Return. They think you're a celestial, Hope realized, her spell now complete and self-sustaining. Or at least a celestial representative. That's flattering, Ben ventured, unsure how to respond to being mistaken for a member of an ancient cosmic race. The beast spoke again, its words becoming clearer as it adapted to linear time. The schism approaches. The celestials must return. The alignment must be prevented. Ben, Hope, and Kai exchanged confused glances. What schism? Ben asked directly. What alignment? But the temporal stabilization was already beginning to fail. The beasts' forms started to blur again, their connection to conventional time weakening. Chronogens come. The lead beast managed before its speech devolved into temporal distortion again. Maltruant rises. Seek the archive. With that final message, the containment field collapsed. Not from failure but because the beasts themselves seemed to dissolve, their temporal nature reasserting itself until they faded from this timeline entirely. Silence fell over the observatory, Br. occasioned only by the soft hum of Kai's equipment powering down and the residual energy of Hope's spell dissipating. "Well," Ben finally said, "that was cryptic and ominous. Par for the course when dealing with temporal entities," Hope replied, though her attempted lightness couldn't hide her concern. "The question is which part we should be most worried about, chronogens, maltruant, or this mysterious schism?" "All of the above," Kai suggested pragmatically, already analyzing the data her instruments had collected. "But the mention of an archive might be our best lead." Ben looked down at the Omnitrix, its new configuration now seeming less like an upgrade and more like a responsibility. "Any idea what archive a temporal beast might be referring to?" Hope was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "There are legends of a celestial archive, a repository of knowledge that exists outside conventional space-time. It's mentioned in some of the oldest magical texts as the source of all transformative magic. So we find this archive," Ben concluded, the path forward becoming clear despite the complications. "Before Psychobos, Maltruant, or the chronogens do. It won't be that simple," Hope cautioned. "The archive isn't just hidden, it's temporally and dimensionally locked. We would need a key." Ben raised his wrist, the Omnitrix glowing softly in the dimness of the observatory. "I think I might have one." Quote. Hope studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she smiled, not her usual sardonic smirk, but something more genuine. "6 years ago, I would have tried to take that from you by force," she admitted. "Now I'm actually glad it found its way to you instead of someone else." "High praise coming from you," Ben noted, returning her smile with one of his own. "Don't let it go to your head," she replied, some of her familiar edge returning. "We've still got multiple cosmic-level threats to deal with and an interdimensional archive to find." Kai finished packing her equipment, her practical nature asserting itself. "We should move again. This location is compromised, and we need resources, particularly information about this archive." "I know someone who might help," Ben suggested after a moment's consideration. "Though she's not exactly going to be thrilled to see any of us." Hope raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Ester," Ben clarified. "She's now the leader of the Kraho, and according to Plummer records, her people have legends about the Celestials. They called them the Burning Ones who shaped the stars." "The hot spot would also be defensible," Kai acknowledged, referring to the underground volcanic region where the Kraho had established their settlement. "And its unique thermal properties might help mask the Omnitrix's energy signature." Hope nodded in agreement. The intersection of extreme thermal conditions and dimensional space could provide temporary shielding. She glanced at Ben with a hint of her old mischief. "Though I'm curious how your ex-girlfriend is going to feel about you showing up with 2 women in tow, asking for help with a cosmic crisis you've unleashed." Ben winced slightly. "When you put it that way." "We're colleagues," Kai stated firmly, though Ben noticed her glancing at him with an expression that suggested the distinction might not be entirely clear-cut. "Professional allies," Hope agreed with equal firmness, though the quick look she exchanged with Kai held a surprising amount of shared understanding. Ben looked between them, suddenly feeling like he was missing something important in the subtext. Before he could pursue that thought, the Omnitrix pulsed again, more urgently this time. "Whatever we're doing, we should do it soon," he said, the device on his wrist seeming almost anxious. "I think it's trying to tell me we don't have much time." Hope produced a final teleportation crystal, this one glowing with fierce red energy. "This will get us to the access point nearest to the hot spot. After that, we'll have to make contact with the Kraho through conventional means." "You just happen to have a teleportation crystal calibrated to an underground volcanic region?" Ben asked, impressed and slightly suspicious. Hope's expression was unreadable. "I make it a point to have escape routes to every strategically significant location on Earth." "Paranoid much?" He couldn't help asking. "Prepared," she corrected, her tone making it clear the distinction was important to her. "A lesson I learned partly thanks to you, Tennyson." Before Ben could respond to that ambiguous statement, Hope crushed the crystal. Red smoke enveloped them, and reality shifted once more, carrying them toward their next destination and whatever comp locations awaited with Ester and the Kraho. As they teleported away, none of them noticed the observatory telescope adjusting itself slightly, focusing on the exact spot they had occupied. Through its lens, a trio of Chronosian eyes watched with cold calculation, before the observer phased out of this timeline to report what they had discovered. The hunt for the celestial key was only beginning. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Thermal Equilibrium. Red smoke dissipated around them, revealing a narrow tunnel carved through ancient basalt. Residual heat radiated from the volcanic rock, immediately, bringing beads of sweat to Ben's forehead. The passageway stretched ahead, illuminated by occasional pockets of magma visible through translucent crystalline viewports in the walls. The hotspot access tunnel, Hope confirmed, already adjusting her attire with a quick spell that transformed her garments into something more suitable for the increasing temperature. The Kraho settlement should be about 2 kilometers ahead. Ben wiped perspiration from his brow, feeling the Omnitrix pulse against his skin. The device had been growing steadily warmer since their teleportation, not painfully so yet, but concerning nonetheless. Is it supposed to be doing that? Kai asked, noticing his expression as she unpacked a thermal regulation suit from her expedition gear. No, Ben replied, studying the device with growing concern. It's heating up faster than I am. Hope stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she observed the Omnitrix. The crystalline structures are vibrating at an accelerated frequency. She placed her hand near it without touching, feeling the heat radiating outward. This isn't just ambient temperature response, it's an internal reaction. The tunnel gave a subtle shake, loose pebbles skittering across the floor. Not unusual in a volcanic region, but it put them all on alert nonetheless. We should move, Kai suggested, now fully attired in her heat-resistant gear. Standing around in an unstable lava tube isn't ideal. Ben nodded, but as they began walking, the Omnitrix's temperature continued to rise. By the time they'd covered half a kilometer, the device had become uncomfortably hot against his skin. This isn't sustainable, he muttered, resisting the urge to transform. If Hope was right about each transformation sending out traceable energy pulses, he needed to be strategic about when to use it. Hope had been unnaturally quiet, her expression suggesting intense concentration. Finally, she spoke. The celestial key is responding to something here. The ancient texts mentioned their technology had unique reactions to extreme environmental conditions. Responding how? Ben asked, unable to keep the tension from his voice as the heat intensified. The Kraho legends might tell us, Hope replied, her usual certainty tempered with genuine concern. Their stories of the burning ones who shaped the stars often featured trials by fire, literal cosmic fire. Another tremor shook the tunnel, stronger this time. Small fissures appeared in the walls, releasing superheated vapor that forced them to cover their faces. That wasn't volcanic activity, Kai stated with professional certainty. The vibration pattern was wrong, more like an impact. We've got company, Ben concluded grimly. As if confirming his assessment, a sound echoed through the tunnel behind them, a rhythmic, mechanical clanking that suggested something large and unwelcome approaching. Run or fight? Kai asked pragmatically, already adjusting what appeared to be a modified blaster from her archaeological defense kit. Ben checked the Omnitrix. Its heat now radiated several inches from his wrist, distorting the air around it. Run. We need to reach Ester and her people before this thing cooks my arm off. They accelerated down the tunnel, the temperature rising with each step deeper into the volcanic region. The mechanical sounds behind them grew louder, AC, accompanied now by a high-pitched whine that set their teeth on edge. Temporal displacement engines, Hope identified, her expression grim. Maltruant's technology. How did they find us so quickly? Ben asked, wincing as the Omnitrix's heat spiked painfully. The thermal signature, Kai realized, her scientific mind making the connection. The Omnitrix's reaction to this environment is probable. Why creating a beacon effect across temporal frequencies? The tunnel ahead split into 3 branches. Ben hesitated, trying to remember the route from his previous visits years ago. Left, he decided after a moment's consideration. The main Kraho settlement should be. A figure suddenly dropped from a concealed opening in the ceiling, landing in a graceful crouch directly in their path. Athletic and lithe, with distinctive magenta skin and a shock of flame-red hair styled in an elaborate braid interwoven with what appeared to be volcanic crystals. Her attire combined traditional Kraho thermal garments with modern adaptations that suggested both practicality and leadership. Right, actually, Ester corrected, rising to her full height with fluid grace. Her eyes, sharper and more anally tickled than Ben remembered, took in the three of them with rapid assessment. "You're making enough noise to wake the ancient caldera, Ben Tennyson." "Ester," Ben managed, momentarily thrown by her sudden appearance despite knowing they were headed for her territory. "We need your help." Clearly, she cut him off, her attention already shifting to the Omnitrix, which now glowed with concerning intensity. Without hesitation, she extended her elastic arm, stretching it to an impossible length to examine the device without approaching. "Celestial technology, activated and destabilizing." Her tone was matter of fact, as though identifying exotic cosmic artifacts was routine. Hope and Kai exchanged surprised glances. "You recognize it?" Hope asked, professional interest overriding any social awkwardness. Ester's gaze shifted to Hope, recognition and wariness flickering across her features. "Charmcaster. Or is it Hope now? The magical signature you're carrying has evolved." Her attention moved to Kai with equal assessment. "And Kai Green. Still digging up trouble, I see." The mechanical sounds from behind grew louder, now accompanied by impacts that shook the entire tunnel. Introductions later, Ester decided, retracting her arm. "Follow me, and stay close." She pressed her palm against an unremarkable section of wall, which immediately reconfigured, revealing a hidden passage barely visible in the volcanic rock. They slipped through the opening just as something massive rounded the corner behind them, a hulking mechanical construct with multiple limbs ending in temporal displacement weapons. The wall sealed seamlessly behind them, cutting off their pursuer. "Temporal Hunter," Ester identified without looking back, leading them through a narrow passage that sloped steeply downward. "Third one this week. They've been appearing throughout the hot spot since that pulse of energy 3 hours ago." She gave Ben a pointed look. "You're doing, I assume." Ben grimaced as Anyo. Fair wave of heat radiated from the Omnitrix. "Not intentionally. We found an artifact in Peru that merged with the Omnitrix. Now it's overheating and attracting unwanted attention." "The celestial key," Ester stated. Not a question but a confirmation. "Our records warned this might happen someday." The passage opened suddenly into a vast cavern that took Ben's breath away despite his discomfort. Since his last visit years ago, the Kraho settlement had transformed from a functional refugee camp into a thriving underground city. Dwellings were carved into the volcanic walls with artistic precision, connected by bridges spanning magma channels that provided both heat and a natural defense system. Agricultural terraces utilized the thermal energy for growing adapted crops, and what appeared to be a sophisticated water collection system channeled condensation from the cavern ceiling. Most striking were the technological elements seamlessly integrated with the natural volcanic features, heat exchangers, energy collectors, and communication arrays that suggested a civilization far more advanced than their apparent Stone Age surroundings. "Welcome to Therma," Ester said, a note of evident in her voice as she registered their amazement. "We've been busy while you were off saving the universe." "This is extraordinary," Kai breathed, her archaeologist's eye taking in the architectural achievements. "You've combined traditional Kraho designs with Earth technology and something else." "Geothermal engineering we developed ourselves," Ester confirmed, leading them across a bridge of what appeared to be flexible obsidian-like material. Necessity breeds innovation when you live inside a volcano. Hope was studying the various mystical symbols etched into key structural supports. "These are protection wards, ancient ones. Some I don't recognize." "Thermal binding sigils," Ester explained, her knowledge clearly surprising Hope. "They help stabilize the magma flows and prevent unwanted dimensional bleed-through. Essential when you live on a geothermal hotspot that intersects with 17 different reality planes." Other Kraho citizens observed their passage with varying expressions, curiosity, concern, and in some cases, clear recognition of Ben. Many offered respectful nods to Ester, confirming her leadership position. "The council chamber is this way." Ester directed them toward a larger structure at the center of the settlement. "And we should hurry. Your Omnitrix is approaching critical thermal imbalance." Ben didn't need the reminder. The device now burned against his skin, the pain becoming difficult to ignore. "How did you know that?" "Thermal sensitivity is our specialty," Ester replied without slowing her pace. "And the celestial artifact CTS feature prominently in our historical records. They were notorious for their thermal regulation issues when first activated. The council chamber proved to be a circular room built around a controlled magma vent. The heat here was intense but channeled through precisely engineered conduits. 7 stone seats surrounded the central vent, each carved with unique symbols. Ester took the largest, gesturing for the others to sit opposite her. So, she began once they were seated, her leader's demeanor fully evident. You've awakened the celestial key, merged it with Azimuth's derivative technology. And now you're surprised that it's overheating and attracting temporal hunters. Did I miss anything? When you put it that way, it sounds like we should have known better, Ben remarked, unable to keep a hint of their old friendly banter from his voice despite the seriousness of the situation. Ester's professional facade cracked slightly, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Some things never change, Ben Tennyson. Still stumbling into cosmic power beyond your understanding. To be fair, Kai interjected, none of us anticipated the artifact would merge with the Omnitrix. We were conducting a standard archaeological assessment. Nothing is standard when it involves Ben, Ester replied, but her tone held more resignation than accusation. She turned her attention to Hope. And your involvement? The last I heard, you were researching dimensional boundaries in Tibet. Hope raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised that Ester had kept track of her activities. News travels fast in magical circles. We monitor all significant mystical events, Ester explained unapologetically. Thermal fluctuations often precede dimensional instabilities, which threaten our environment. Ben winced as the Omnitrix pulsed again, the heat now radiating up his arm. Ester noticed immediately, her expression shifting from diplomatic leader to concerned expert. We need to stabilize that immediately, she decided. Standing and approaching a section of wall inscribed with complex equations. She pressed her palm against the surface, causing it to reconfigure into what appeared to be a control panel. The celestial key is attempting to calibrate itself to this dimension's thermal constants, but the Omnitrix is interfering with the process. Can you help? Ben asked, the pain making it difficult to maintain his usual confident demeanor. Ester's expression softened slightly at his evident discomfort. Yes, but it will require accessing ancestral knowledge that we don't share with outsiders. She paused, then added with significance, normally. Hope caught the implication immediately. You want something in exchange. Information, Ester confirmed, her gaze steady. Everything you've learned about the celestial key, its capabilities, and why it's activated now after millennia dormant. Done, Ben agreed without hesitation, earning surprised looks from both Kai and Hope. What? My arm is on fire. There are temporal hunters after us, and the fate of multiple timelines might be at stake. This isn't the time for secrecy. Ester studied him for a moment, then nodded with approval. You have grown up, Ben Tennyson. She turned to a communication panel and spoke in the native Kraho language, her words flowing with musical precision. Minutes later, a delegation of older Kraho entered the chamber, each bearing what appeared to be data crystals of volcanic glass. They regarded the visitors with solemn curiosity before arranging themselves around the central vent. Our ancestral knowledge keepers, Ester introduced them with evident respect. They maintain the records of our people's contact with the Celestials over 20,000 years ago. The eldest of the group, a female Kraho with elaborate thermal markings across her skin, stepped forward. I am Sarah, first keeper of the burning memory. Show me the key. Ben extended his arm, revealing the transformed Omnitrix with its integrated crystalline structures. Sarah studied it without touching, her eyes narrowing in concentration. The calibration cascade has begun, she pronounced after careful examination. The key seeks thermal equilibrium with its wielder, but your physiology resists the necessary temperature. Is that a polite way of saying I'm about to spontaneously combust? Ben asked, managing to keep his tone light despite the increasing pain. Sarah's serious expression cracked into unexpected amusement. Your predecessor had similar concerns when first bonded with celestial technology. My predecessor. Ben's surprise momentarily overrode his discomfort. The Celestials chose representatives from various species during their time in this galaxy, Ester explained. According to our records, a human was among them, though this was nearly 50,000 years ago. Hope leaned forward, professional interest evident. The human myths of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods may have basis in actual events, Sarah confirmed. The human representative was gifted with living fire, that transformed him in ways his people could not comprehend. A particularly painful pulse from the Omnitrix interrupted the history lesson, causing Ben to grit his teeth. Fascinating as this is, can we focus on the not burning alive part first? Of course, Sarah replied, signaling to the other keepers. They placed their crystals in specific formations around the central vent, creating a pattern that matched the symbols now visible on the Omnitrix. The stabilization requires 3 elements, Ester explained. Moving to a position within the pattern. Ancestral knowledge, thermal expertise, and, she hesitated, looking at Ben with an unreadable expression, genetic compatibility. Meaning? Kai asked, her protective instincts visibly rising. The key must recognize compatible DNA to complete its calibration, Sarah explained. As descendants of those who worked with the Celestials, our genetic memory contains recognition patterns. And as someone with a previous connection to Ben, Ester's DNA carries additional resonance, Hope concluded, her analytical mind making the connection. Ester's expression remained professionally neutral despite the personal implication. The compatibility is scientific, not romantic, she clarified, though something in her tone suggested the distinction wasn't entirely clear-cut. Ben met her gaze directly. What do I need to do? Place your hand in the thermal vent, she instructed, indicating the controlled magma flow at the center of their circle. It won't harm you, the key will protect your tissue while it absorbs the necessary thermal patterns. Ben hesitated only momentarily before extending his arm toward the glowing magma. The heat was overwhelming, yet somehow not burning. The Omnitrix's crystalline elements began to glow in response, pulsing in rhythm with the flowing molten rock. Ester stepped forward, placing her hand beside his in the magma flow. Now we complete the recognition sequence. Their hands didn't touch, but something passed between them, a transfer of energy that manifested as NC-ing particles of light moving from Ester's fingers to the Omnitrix. The device's pulsing synchronized with the movement of energy, its painful heat gradually transforming into a controlled warmth. The ancestral keepers began chanting in their ancient language, the volcanic glass crystals resonating with each syllable. The chamber filled with harmonics that seemed to vibrate at the molecular level, affecting the very air around them. Kai and Hope watched in fascinated silence, the scientist and the sorceress each recognizing elements of the process from their respective disciplines. Gradually, the painful heat radiating from the Omnitrix subsided, replaced by a steady, controlled warmth. The crystalline structures stopped their erratic pulsing and settled into a stable glow that matched the magma's flow. Thermal equilibrium achieved, Sarah announced as the harmonic resonance reached its peak and then gradually faded. Ben withdrew his hand from the magma, finding no damage despite the impossible temperatures. The Omnitrix had transformed again. The crystalline veins now flowed more organically through its structure, and the interface displayed new symbols that somehow seemed more intuitive than before. It's communicating with me, he realized, feeling impressions rather than words flowing from the device. Showing me how to control the thermal output. The celestial key is partially sentient, Sarah confirmed. It adapts to its wielder's thought patterns and physiological needs. Ester also withdrew her hand, studying Ben with professional assessment. The genetic recognition is complete. The key has accepted both your DNA and its connection to our ancestral patterns. Thank you, Ben said with genuine gratitude, the relief from pain making him momentarily lightheaded. I don't know how much longer I could have. A massive explosion rocked the chamber, sending tremors through the entire settlement. Alarm systems activated throughout Therma, bathing the cavern in pulsing red light. Perimeter breach, a Kraho guard announced, rushing into the council chamber. Temporal hunters have penetrated the outer defenses. Ester's demeanor shifted instant. TLY from ceremonial leader to battle commander. Activate the magma shields. Begin evacuation protocol Ember. How many? Ben asked, already rising to his feet, the Omnitrix now steady and responsive under his touch. 7 constructs detected, the guard reported. And something else, a temporal anomaly unlike anything we've recorded. Hope and Kai exchanged concerned glances. Maltruant, Hope concluded grimly. Or some version of him. You should leave, Ester told them, already moving toward what appeared to be an armory section of the chamber. We have escape tunnels that can take you to the surface. Not a chance, Ben replied firmly. This is our problem, not yours. We brought this to your doorstep. And I'm not abandoning research subjects this significant, Kai added. Our scientist's determination evident as she prepared her modified weapons. The magical countermeasures I can create might be effective against temporal technology, Hope offered, already beginning to weave defensive spells between her fingers. Ester studied them for a moment, then nodded sharply. Your assistance is appreciated, but this is still my territory. She retrieved what appeared to be thermal gauntlets from the armory, sliding them onto her elastic arms. We defend by my command, understood? The authority in her voice was unmistakable. This was no longer the teenage girl Ben had known, but a leader responsible for her people's survival. Understood, Ben agreed with newfound respect. What's the plan? Another explosion shook the chamber, closer this time. Screams and the sounds of combat echoed from the main cavern. They've breached the secondary defenses, the guard reported tensely. Ester's expression hardened. We divide their forces. Hope, your magical abilities would be most effective at the eastern junction where the thermal vents create natural amplification fields. She turned to Kai. Your modified archaeological weapons, they're designed for precision rather than power. Kai nodded, impressed by Ester's assessment. Exactly. Non-destructive containment technology, perfect for the residential sectors where collateral damage must be minimized, Ester decided. Sarah will guide you. She finally turned to Ben. You and I will confront the main threat at the central plaza. Just like old times, Ben couldn't help remarking, though the situation was anything but nostalgic. Ester's serious expression softened momentarily. Except now I'm giving the orders. I'd follow worse leaders, he replied with genuine respect. They moved swiftly through the settlement, which had transformed into a coordinated emergency response system. Kraho civilians evacuated through predetermined routes while defense forces established positions at strategic junctions. Ben was impressed by the level of organization, evidence of Ester's effective leadership. The central plaza revealed the true nature of their threat. 6 mechanical hunters, each 15 feet tall with multiple limbs ending in temporal weapons, surrounded a central figure that radiated malevolent purpose. Not Maltruant himself, but clearly one of his lieutenants. The clockwork being stood 9 feet tall, its body constructed of interlocking gears and time measurement devices from a dozen different civilizations. Temporis Prime, Ester identified grimly. Maltruant's chief enforcer. The mechanical entity turned at their approach, its face a nightmarish collection of clock faces showing different times and dimensions. The celestial key, it intoned, voice grinding like rusted gears. Surrender it, and this settlement will be preserved in the timestream. Charming offer, Ben replied, activating the Omnitrix, but I'll pass. The transformation felt different now, controlled, directed. The energy flowing through established channels rather than erupting chaotically. Where once heat blast would have appeared, now emerged something far beyond, a being composed of living stellar fire. Its core burning with the intensity of a neutron star, yet perfectly contained within a humanoid form that shifted between solid matter and pure energy with each movement. Nova, Ben named himself. The word manifesting a superheated plasma that hung in the air momentarily. Ester showed no surprise at the enhanced transformation, immediately adapting her strategy. Target the temporal displacement generators, she commanded, extending her elastic limbs to engage the nearest hunter. They can't jump timelines if they can't generate a field. Ben, now Nova, responded instantly, generating controlled stellar flares that targeted the specific components she'd identified. His new form moved with both fluid grace and explosive power, each strike releasing precisely controlled bursts of stellar energy. Ester fought with a style Ben had never witnessed before, her elastic abilities now refined into a martial art that utilized three-dimensional space in ways a normal human couldn't comprehend. She stretched, contracted, and reconfigured her body with tactical precision, using the environment as both weapon and shield. Temporis Prime observed their initial success against his hunters with mechanical patience. Then raised a device that resembled an antique astrolabe. Temporal division, he announced, activating the device. Reality fractured around them, splitting the plaza into 3 overlapping timelines. In one, the hunters appeared brand new and untouched. In another, ancient and decaying. In the third, actively self-repairing. He's fragmenting our temporal reality, Ester called out. Adjusting her strategy instantly. Focus on the primary timeline. the one where his device is active. Nova concentrated, finding that his enhanced form could perceive the TIM. Aline divisions as different thermal signatures. He targeted the coolest signature, the original timeline, and unleashed a concentrated beam of stellar energy directly at Temporis Prime's astrolabe. Clockwork Lieutenant deflected the attack with surprising speed, the beam ricocheting into one of the settlement's support structures. Magma began seeping through the damaged section, threatening a larger structural collapse. Careful, Ester warned, stretching her body to block the magma flow while simultaneously engaging two hunters. The entire cavern system is interconnected. Nova adjusted his approach, creating smaller, more precise stellar projectiles that tracked Temporis Prime's movements across the fractured timelines. Sorry, still getting used to the power levels. Elsewhere in the settlement, Hope's magenta energy fields clashed with temporal technology at the eastern junction. Her spells, now enhanced with thermal elements drawn from the environment, created disruption patterns that unraveled the hunters' temporal coherence. Each spell was calculated and precise, the work of a sorceress who had refined her craft beyond mere power into true magical artistry. At the residential sectors, Kai deployed her archaeological containment devices with scientific precision. Each shot from her modified weapons created stasis fields that isolated the hunters from the time stream, rendering them temporarily inert. Her understanding of temporal physics, gained through years studying ancient technologies, allowed her to target specific vulnerabilities in their construction. Back at the central plaza, Temporis Prime recognized the coordinated defense and adjusted his strategy. Chronological acceleration, he announced, activating a secondary device that resembled a pocket watch with multiple hands. The air around Nova began to age rapidly, stellar energy diminishing as eons passed in seconds. He felt his form weakening, the controlled fusion reaction at his core destabilizing. Ben, Ester called out, recognizing the danger. She stretched across the plaza, interposing herself between Nova and the temporal field. Her chronophysiology, naturally resistant to extreme environmental changes, absorbed some of the chronological acceleration, giving Nova precious seconds to respond. Those seconds were enough. Drawing on the newly established thermal equilibrium with the Omnitrix, Nova tapped into something deeper, an evolutionary potential beyond even his enhanced form. The stellar fire that composed his body began to collapse inward, density increasing exponentially until it reached a critical threshold. "What's happening?" Ester called out, still shielding him despite the obvious pain the temporal field was causing her. "I think," Nova began, then gasped as the transformation accelerated. Something new. The implosion reached its limit and then reversed, exploding outward with the force of a supernova. But instead of uncontrolled destruction, the energy reconfigured into a new form. No longer merely stellar fire, but something that existed at the intersection of matter, energy, and time itself. Where Nova had stood, now hovered a being composed of compressed temporal energy. Burning with the light of countless potential timelines. Stars were born and died across the surface of his form, galaxies spiraled through his chest and cosmic background. Radiation flowed from his movements like an aurora. Cosmic, Ben's voice resonated across multiple frequency ranges simultaneously. Ultimate celestial heatblast. Temporis Prime's clockwork face registered something approximating shock. Impossible. The celestial evolutionary matrices were purged from the universe. Apparently not, Cosmic replied, extending a hand toward the chronological acceleration field. Instead of being affected by it, he simply absorbed the temporal energy, incorporating it into his own form. And I'm starting to see why they were feared. With perfect control, Cosmic released the absorbed temporal energy in a reversed wave, causing Temporis Prime's pocket watch device to age backwards until it disintegrated into its component parts. The timeline fractures began to heal, reality reknitting itself around them. Ester, released from the temporal field, stared at Ben's new form with scientific fascination rather than fear. The legends were true, she murmured. The celestial champions could rewrite reality itself. Temporis Prime began to retreat, his hunters forming a protective circle around him. This confrontation is temporally inconclusive, he announced, already activating what appeared to be an emergency displacement field. Maltruant will adjust parameters accordingly. Oh no you don't, Cosmic declared, moving with impossible speed across the plaza. His hand closed around Temporis Prime's central chronometer, the core of the lieutenant's being. First, you're going to answer some questions. The clockwork being struggled against Cosmic's grip, but found his temporal manipulation abilities neutralized by the celestial form's natural counter-resonance. What is Maltruant planning? Cosmic demanded. Why is he so interested in the celestial key? The alignment approaches, Temporis Prime revealed, his mechanical voice stripped of its earlier confidence. The schism must be repaired or exploited. Maltruant seeks the latter. The same terms the temporal beasts mentioned, Ester noted, joining them after dispatching the final hunter with a precise strike to its power core. The alignment and the schism. Explain. Cosmic pressed, tightening his grip slightly. The Celestials departed this reality through a dimensional rift they created. The schism, Temporis Prime explained, seemingly calculating that cooperation FFERED better survival probability than resistance. Every 10,000 years, cosmic conditions allow the schism to be either permanently sealed or fully opened, the alignment. And the next alignment is approaching, Ester concluded. The pieces fitting together in her mind. That's why the celestial key activated now. Affirmative, Temporis Prime confirmed. The key seeks its creators. Maltruant seeks the power of the Celestials. The Chronosians seek to prevent either outcome. And where do we find this schism? Cosmic asked, his patience visibly thinning as stars accelerated their life cycles across his form. The archive contains the coordinates, Temporis Prime replied. The information cannot be extracted through temporal manipulation. Hope and Kai arrived at the plaza. Javi. Ing successfully defended their assigned sectors. They paused momentarily at the sight of Ben's ultimate form before approaching. The settlement is secure, Hope reported, her magical senses already analyzing Ben's transformed state with professional interest. Though there's significant structural damage to the eastern caverns. My teams are already working on repairs, Ester assured her, turning back to Temporis Prime. Where is the archive? The clockwork lieutenant's face plates shifted in what might have been amusement. Scattered across 7 temporal coordinates and 3-dimensional planes. Only a celestial key can access all fragments simultaneously. Convenient, Kai remarked dryly. And no doubt heavily guarded. The archive protects itself, Temporis Prime stated. Those unworthy cannot approach. Cosmic released his grip on the lieutenant's chronometer, having extracted what useful information he could. You're going to leave this settlement and never return, he declared. His voice resonating with cosmic authority. And you'll deliver a message to Maltruant. The celestial key has chosen its wielder. Any attempt to claim it will fail. Temporis Prime's clock W. Orc face rearranged itself into what appeared to be grim acceptance. Message accepted. Temporal displacement initiating. Before any of them could react, the lieutenant and his damaged hunters vanished in a flash of yellow energy, leaving behind only scorch marks on the volcanic stone. The immediate threat removed, Ben reverted from his ultimate form back to human. The transformation released NT waves of residual cosmic energy rippling through the plaza before being absorbed by the surrounding volcanic rock. He stumbled slightly, the experience of the ultimate transformation leaving him momentarily disoriented. Ester caught his arm, her natural heat a steadying presence. That was, he began, searching for adequate words. Godlike, Hope finished for him, her expression a complex mixture of awe and concern. You were manipulating fundamental cosmic forces. How did it feel? Kai asked, her scientific curiosity evident. Ben considered the question carefully. Like I could see everything, every possible timeline, every potential future. It was, he shook his head, overwhelming, but also somehow natural. The celestial champions were said to walk between worlds, Sarah remarked, joining them with the other ancestral keepers, existing simultaneously in multiple realities while maintaining their core identity. Ben flexed his hand, feeling the Omnitrix now perfectly attuned to his body temperature. The thermal equilibrium stabilized it somehow, made the transformation controlled instead of chaotic. As intended, Sarah confirmed. The thermal calibration is me. Rely the first step in awakening the celestial key's full capabilities. There are more steps, Ben asked, not entirely sure if he should be excited or concerned by the prospect. Many, Sarah replied with sage certainty. Each elemental aspect must be balanced. Thermal, electrical, gravitational, dimensional. And with each balance achieved, the key unlocks new evolutionary matrices, Ester added. Her scientific understanding of the process evident. What you experienced today was merely the first stage of thermal evolutionary ascension. The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix, now humming contentedly against his skin, perfectly matched to his body's temperature. So we need to find this archive, he concluded, focusing on the immediate next step. To understand the schism and the alignment, and to determine whether sealing or opening the schism is the right course of action, Hope added pragmatically. Just because Maltruant wants it open doesn't automatically mean closing it is the correct choice. The archive is said to exist in a place between moments, Sarah offered, sharing knowledge rarely revealed to outsiders. Neither past nor future, accessible only when time itself pauses. Well, that's helpfully vague, Ben remarked, though without real frustration. After years of cosmic quests, cryptic clues were practically a professional hazard. Actually, Kai interjected, her archaeological expertise surfacing, there are references to the place between moments in multiple ancient cultures. The Egyptians called it the space between heartbeats of Nut, the Mayans, the stillness between the great breath. The legerdemain texts refer to it as the interval, Hope added, her magical knowledge complementing Kai's historical perspective. A dimensional pocket accessible only through specific temporal conjunctions. And our records call it the waiting dark, Sarah confirmed, pleased by their collective understanding. A realm that exists in the pauses between cosmic pulses. Ester had moved to a settlement control panel, checking damage reports and coordinating repair efforts while still participating in the conversation. The ease with which she managed both leadership responsibilities and theoretical discussion impressed Ben considerably. Whatever we call it, Ester concluded, finding it will require more than just the celestial key. According to our records, the archive's temporal coordinates shift based on astronomical alignments. She manipulated the control panel, bringing up a holographic star chart. The next viable alignment occurs in 3 days, at a location known as the Cradle. The Cradle, Ben repeated, another cryptic location name, actually, a quite literal one. Ester replied with a hint of amusement. It's a formation in the Antarctic permafrost, a perfectly circular depression that matches stellar patterns from 50,000 years ago. The last record, location where celestial technology was actively used on Earth. Antarctica, Ben sighed, from volcanic heat to polar cold. This cosmic quest is certainly hitting temperature extremes. Appropriate, given the nature of the celestial key, Hope observed. Extremes appear to be catalysts for its evolutionary processes. Ester finished her command inputs and turned her full attention to them. We can provide transportation to the Antarctic outpost. The Kraho maintain a research facility there. The thermal contrast between volcanic regions and polar ice creates unique energy signatures we've been studying. You've expanded well beyond the hot spot, Kai noted with genuine admiration. Necessity and curiosity, Ester explained simply. After the last Incarsine invasion attempt, we realized staying hidden in one location was no longer viable. Now we maintain outposts at thermal extremes worldwide. Strategic, Hope commented with professional respect. Practical, Ester corrected. Dispersed population centers ensure our survival regardless of localized threats. Ben watched this exchange with growing appreciation for how Ester had developed as a leader. The impulsive, adventure-seeking teenager had matured into a strategically minded chief who balanced immediate needs with long-term planning. Before we depart for Antarctica, Sarah interjected, there is one more ECT of thermal equilibrium that should be addressed. She turned to Ben with a serious expression. The celestial key has accepted your genetic pattern, but its full integration requires an understanding of its capabilities that mere technical knowledge cannot provide. Meaning, Ben prompted, sensing something significant in her careful phrasing. Meaning, Ester translated, that you need cultural context for the power you now wield. She exchanged glances with Sarah, receiving a nod of permission. Our ancestral records contain personal accounts from those who worked directly with the Celestials. These are not just technical manuals, but philosophical treatises on the responsibility of wielding cosmic power. Knowledge we do not share outside our people, Sarah emphasized. But circumstances now demand an exception. Ben understood the significance of this offer. "I would be honored," he replied with genuine respect. "And I recognize the trust this represents." Ester nodded, pleased by his response. "The thermal meditation chamber will provide the proper environment. It should take a few hours to transfer the essential knowledge." "Hours," Kai repeated, concerned. "The temporal hunters might regroup. We should maintain our momentum toward Antarctica. The knowledge is necessary for proper control of the ultimate transformations," Sarah countered firmly. "Without it, EACH new evolutionary matrix activated creates greater risk of dimensional instability. I've seen what happens when people wield power they don't understand," Hope added, her own painful history giving weight to her words. "A few hours' delay is worth the reduced risk." Ester looked to Ben, making it clear that despite her leadership position, this particular decision was his to make. "The choice is yours, Ben. But consider this. The celestial key chose you specifically. Understanding why might be as important as understanding how it works." Ben considered their perspectives, feeling the Omnitrix, now pleasantly warm rather than painful, pulse gently against his skin. Something about the device's rhythm suggested agreement with Ester's assessment. "We'll stay," he decided. "If I'm going to wield this power, I should understand its origins and purpose." Ester nodded with approval. "A wise choice." She turned to Hope and Kai. "While Ben undergoes the knowledge transfer, perhaps you'll be interested in examining our historical records regarding the Celestials. We have artifacts and texts that might provide additional context for your magical and archaeological expertise." Both women showed immediate interest, professional curiosity temporarily overriding any concerns about delay. "Lead the way," Hope responded, clearly intrigued by the prospect of accessing previously unknown mystical knowledge. As Ester guided them toward different sections of the settlement, Ben found himself reflecting on how much she had changed, and how much she had remained the same. The core qualities he had been attracted to years ago, intelligence, adaptability, natural leadership, had simply matured and focused. Sarah led Ben to a smaller chamber adjacent to the council room. Unlike the grander spaces of Therma, this room was intimate and intentionally minimalist. A circular depression in the center glowed with controlled magma flow, creating a meditation space surrounded by ancient symbols etched into volcanic glass. "Remove your shoes and sit at the center," Sarah instructed. "The thermal field will facilitate the knowledge transfer." Ben complied, settling into a cross-legged position above the magma flow. Rather than burning him, the heat enveloped him like a comfortable blanket. Sarah placed 7 crystalline objects around him in a precise pattern. "These contain the auras and wisdom of our ancestors who worked directly with the Celestials. The transfer is not merely informational. You will experience their perspectives, feel what they felt." "Will it hurt?" Ben asked practically, having experienced enough painful mind melds in his hero career to be justifiably cautious. "Not physically," Sarah replied honestly. "But emotionally, these experiences span the age of celestial involvement with our world, through their eventual departure. Not all memories are pleasant." Ben nodded his understanding. "I'm ready." Sarah activated the crystals with a series of precise gestures. They began to glow with increasing intensity, the light synchronizing with the pulsing of the Omnitrix. "Open yourself to the thermal flow," she instructed, her voice becoming distant as the process began. "Let the memories find their own path through your consciousness." The chamber around Ben seemed to dissolve, replaced by visions of a world 50,000 years in the past. He saw through the eyes of a young Kraho, experiencing the moment when massive crystalline ships descended from the stars, bringing beings of pure energy and purpose to Earth. The Celestials appeared not as physical entities but as complex patterns of light and energy that could assume different forms based on need or preference. Their communication occurred not through sound but through ECT conceptual transfer, entire complex ideas transmitted instantaneously. Through the ancestral memories, Ben witnessed the Celestials' purpose. They were cosmic gardeners, nurturing evolutionary potential across thousands of worlds. Earth was one of many planets where they established observation posts and selected representatives from promising species. The Kraho memories showed how the Celestials had recognized their natural thermal adaptation as complementary to their own energy-based existence. Together, they had developed technologies that harnessed thermal extremes to access dimensio null boundaries, the precursors to the very transportation systems the Kraho still used. Time seemed to accelerate through the memories. Ben experienced centuries of collaboration compressed into NTS, the development of transformation technology that allowed representatives to access their species' evolutionary potential, the creation of monitoring stations at key energy convergence points around the planet. The gradual elevation of consciousness among the chosen representatives. Then came darker memories, the growing schism within the celestial collective itself. Some believed their intervention should be limited to observation and gentle guidance, others advocated for more direct manipulation of evolutionary paths. The philosophical division deepened until it manifested as a literal dimensional rift, the schism. Ben felt the confusion and sorrow of the Kraho ancestors as their celestial partners withdrew, preparing to depart through the schism they had created. The keys, devices had contained the essence of celestial transformation technology, were hidden around the planet, entrusted to the representatives with instructions to protect them until the Celestials might one day return. The final memory was the most powerful, a direct message from a Celestial to the Kraho ancestors, transmitted as pure conceptual understanding rather than words. The keys will choose when they are needed. The alignment will determine our return or our permanent separation. The choice made then must be made with wisdom beyond individual desire. The power to transform is the power to become, not just physically, but spiritually. Evolution is not merely adaptation to environment, but transcendence of limitation. Asterisk. As the vision faded, Ben found himself back in the meditation chamber, perspiration covering his body from the intensity of the experience. Sarah watched him with knowing eyes, recognizing the impact of the ancestral memories. Now you understand, she said simply. The celestial key is not merely a tool or weapon. It is a philosophical statement made manifest, the belief that consciousness can direct evolution toward its highest potential. Ben nodded, still processing the vast knowledge that had been transferred. They were trying to create bridges between different forms of existence. The transformation technology wasn't about power, it was about understanding. Precisely, Sarah confirmed, pleased by his comprehension. Each transformation is an opportunity to experience existence from a different perspective. The ultimate forms are not merely combat enhancements, but windows into evolutionary potential. And the Omnitrix, Ben realized, looking down at the device with new appreciation, Azimuth created it based on the same philosophy, even if he didn't have access to the full celestial technology. The greatest minds often rediscover eternal truths, Sarah agreed. Though Azimuth's device focuses more on the practical applications than the spiritual dimensions of transformation. Ben rose slowly, feeling somehow both exhausted and energized by the experience. The Omnitrix pulsed contentedly against his skin, now in perfect harmony with his body's natural rhythms. Thank you, he said to Sarah with genuine gratitude. This context changes everything. Knowledge always does, she replied with a slight smile. The question is how you will apply it. When they returned to the main settlement, they found Hope, Kai, and Ester engaged in animated discussion around a table covered with ancient texts and artifacts. Their initial professional formality had evidently evolved into genuine collaborative enthusiasm during Ben's absence. The thermal regulation systems described here predate our earliest records of dimensional travel technology by millennia, Hope was saying, indicating a section of text with evident excitement. If we could adapt these principles to modern magical containment fields, the applications for archaeological preservation alone would be revolutionary, Kai added, her scientific mind already considering practical implementations. Thermal degradation is the primary enemy of artifact recovery. RNG. Nears have developed miniaturized versions for precisely that purpose, Ester replied, activating a holographic display showing detailed schematics. The challenge has been maintaining stability across extreme temperature differentials. A modified ward structure might address that, Hope suggested, already sketching magical formulas in the air with glowing energy. Ben watched this unexpected collaboration with amusement and appreciation. Despite their different backgrounds and previous complicated relationships, the three women had found common ground in their shared intellectual curiosity. Ester noticed his return first, her expression shifting from academic excitement to concerned assessment. How was the knowledge transfer? Intense, Ben admitted, but enlightening. You look different, Kai observed. studying him with scientific precision. Your thermal signature has stabilized at a higher baseline. Side effect of the transfer, Sarah explained. His physiology is adapting to better channel the celestial energies. Hope conducted a quick magical assessment, her hands tracing patterns in the air around Ben. The dimensional resonance is more harmonious as well. Less chaotic interference. I feel clearer, Ben acknowledged, struggling to articulate the subtle but significant changes. Like I understand the transformations on a deeper level now. The ancest, raw memories provide context that mere technical knowledge cannot, Ester explained. You're not just operating the celestial key now, you're beginning to comprehend its purpose. A Kraho communications officer approached, interrupting their discussion. Chief Ester, preparations for Antarctic transport are complete. The thermal vessel is ready when our guests are prepared to depart. Ester ACKN. Acknowledged the report with a nod before turning back to Ben and the others. The journey to Antarctica will take approximately 4 hours using our thermal transport system. We should depart soon if we want to arrive with adequate time to prepare for the celestial alignment. Your people have been incredibly generous, Ben said, aware that their help had come at potential risk to the Kraho settlement. I don't know how to thank you. Use the celestial key wisely, Ester replied simply. That will be thanks enough. She hesitated, then added with more personal warmth, and perhaps visit Akka Shanali without bringing cosmic catastrophe to our doorstep. Ben smiled, recognizing the affectionate teasing behind her words. I'll try, but you know how it is with me in trouble. Magnetically attracted, she agreed with a hint of their old familiarity. Some things never change. As they gathered their equipment and prepared for departure, Sarah approached Ben one final time. Remember had you experienced in the thermal meditation. The Celestials believed transformation was a path to understanding, not merely a means to power. I'll remember, Ben promised, the ancestral memories still vivid in his mind. The thermal vessel proved to be an impressive example of Kraho engineering, a sleek craft designed to travel through the planet's natural thermal conduits at extraordinary speeds. The interior combined comfortable accommodation with sophisticated monitoring equipment that constantly analyzed global thermal patterns. Ester personally conducted a final systems check before joining them in the main cabin. I'll be accompanying you to Antarctica, she announced, noting their surprise. Our outpost there is conducting critical research that may be relevant to the celestial technology. The more, the merrier. Ben replied, genuinely pleased by the news. Especially someone with your expertise. Hope and Kai exchanged a quick glance that Ben couldn't quite interpret before nodding their agreement. As the thermal vessel prepared for departure, Ben found himself watching Ester direct her crew with confident efficiency. The teenage girl who had once snuck away from her people for adventures with him had become a leader who balanced responsibility with curiosity, much as he himself had been forced to grow and evolve. The Omnitrix pulsed gently against his skin, perfectly attuned to his body temperature. The thermal equilibrium had been achieved, but Ben suspected the journey toward understanding the celestial key's full purpose was just beginning. The vessel hummed to life, thermal energy propelling them into specialized tunnels that followed the planet's natural magma flows. Ahead lay Antarctica, the cradle, and the next step toward finding the archive and understanding the approaching alignment. Behind them, in the council chamber of Therma, Sarah and the other ancestral keepers gathered around the central vent, their expressions solemn. It has begun, the eldest keeper stated simply. The cycle returns. Will they make the right choice when the time comes? Another asked, concern evident. Sarah gazed into the flowing magma, its patterns reflecting possibilities beyond normal perception. The human bears the wisdom of our ancestors now, alongside the power of the key. That balance gives me hope. And if they fail, the youngest keeper pressed, if the schism is exploited rather than healed, then we prepare, Sarah replied with the calm certainty of one who had witnessed many crises throughout a long lifetime. As we always have, the magma flows shifted, momentarily forming patterns that resembled the symbols on the transformed Omnitrix. The thermal equilibrium had been established, the first step in awakening the celestial key's full potential. What would follow remained written only in the flows of time itself, waiting to be discovered. Chapter 2 End Chapter 3, Nanite Integration. Antarctica greeted them with a howly wind that clawed through thermal shields as if they were tissue paper. The Kraho vessel, designed for navigating the planet's molten arteries, settled onto the pristine ice with a soft hiss. Steam billowed around its hull where superheated metal met the polar surface, creating a momentary fog bank that obscured the landscape. External temperature, -78 degrees Celsius, announced the vessel's analytical system, advising maximum thermal protection protocols. Ben exhaled slowly, watching his breath crystallize instantly. The Omnitrix, so recently stabilized at volcanic temperatures, now pulsed with a rhythmic blue light that seemed to respond to the extreme cold. Not painful this time, but noticeably reactive. "It's singing," he murmured, holding his wrist closer to his ear. A barely perceptible harmonic resonance emanated from the device, like crystal chimes in miniature. Ester observed with scientific interest. "The thermal equilibrium we established is being tested at the opposite extreme. The celestial key adapts to environmental conditions rather than fighting them." Hope studied the device from a magical perspective, tracing arcane patterns in the air around Ben's wrist. "It's actively absorbing the thermal differential data. Learning, not just responding." "Fascinating," Kai added, already recording measurements with her archaeological equipment. "The energy signature suggests dimensional folding, as if it's comparing this environment to thousands of similar ones across different realities." They disembarked onto the ice shelf, protected by Raho-engineered thermal suits that channeled heat from internal reservoirs. Even Ester, naturally resistant to cold, wore specialized gear that maintained her physiological equilibrium. "The cradle lies 3 kilometers north," she informed them, consulting a holographic map projected from her wrist device. "Our outpost is positioned at its southern edge." The Antarctic landscape stretched around them, pristine, ancient, indifferent to their presence. Despite the brutal cold, Ben found himself appreciating its stark beauty. After the chaotic events of recent days, there was something calming about this untouched wilderness. The calm proved short-lived. Halfway to their destination, the Omnitrix's gentle singing transformed into an urgent staccato pulse. Ben stopped abruptly, staring at He device as tiny filaments of blue-green light began extending from its surface, reaching toward the sleeve of his thermal suit. Guys," he called, keeping his voice deliberately steady. "Something's happening." The others gathered around, watching with varying expressions of concern and fascination as the filaments made contact with the suit's technology. Instead of damaging the material, they seemed to interface with it, creating a network of luminous connections across the fabric. "It's assimilating the thermal regulation technology," Ester observed, her thermal vision allowing her to perceive energy patterns invisible to human eyes. "Not just assimilating," Hope corrected, her magical senses detecting something more complex. "It's optimizing. The energy flow patterns are becoming more efficient." The process spread rapidly, the suit's built-in systems responding to the Omnitrix's modifications with increased performance. Ben felt the temperature regulation improve immediately, providing perfect comfort despite the brutal cold. "That's convenient, I guess," he ventured, not entirely comfortable with the device making autonomous decisions. Kai's scientific caution asserted itself. "We should limit its access to technology until we understand this behavior better. If it can modify thermal regulation systems, what else might it attempt to integrate with?" As if responding to her concern, the filaments retracted back into the Omnitrix, leaving the thermal suit enhanced but otherwise unchanged. The device's pulsing stabilized into a steady rhythm once more. "It seems to respond to intent as much as environment," Ben noted, feeling impressions rather than explicit communication from the device. "Like it knew we were concerned and backed off." The ants' straw memories mentioned this capability, Ester confirmed as they resumed walking. The celestial technology was designed to adapt and evolve through environmental interaction. They called it learning through communion. The Kraho outpost emerged from the whiteness ahead, a series of sleek structures that somehow appeared both futuristic and organic, perfectly integrated with the ice shelf. Unlike typical Antarctic research stations, these buildings seemed to grow from the landscape rather than impose upon it. "Impressive," Hope acknowledged, recognizing the magical principles incorporated into the architecture. "You've adapted thermal channeling sigils for structural integrity." "Necessity bred innovation," Ester replied with modest pride. Standard materials couldn't withstand the thermal differentials our people require. They were greeted by a small team of Kraho researchers who, despite their obvious curiosity about the visitors, maintained professional composure. Ben Noti, CED their respectful deference to Ester, not merely as a leader, but as a scientist in her own right. The anomalous readings have increased by 37% since your departure, reported the lead researcher. A tall Kraho with intricate thermal pattern markings across his exposed skin. The cradle is awakening. Ester's expression grew serious. Show me. They were led to a monitoring center where holographic displays showed real-time data flowing from sensors placed throughout the massive ice depression known as the cradle. The circular formation, nearly 3 kilometers in diameter, appeared unremarkable on visual displays, but energy readings told a different story. The subterranean structure is becoming active, explained the researcher, highlighting patterns that pulsed in rhythm suspiciously similar to the Omnitrix. These energy signatures match no known thermal, electromagnetic, or radioactive profiles in our database. They match this, though, Ben said, holding up his wrist. The Omnitrix's pulse immediately synchronized with the patterns on the display, causing several monitoring systems to chirp with alert notifications. Direct resonance confirmed, the researcher announced unnecessarily. The celestial key is communicating with the structure. Ester studied the data with the focus of someone accustomed to making critical decisions based on limited information. We need to approach the central activation point. These readings suggest a technological awakening sequence has begun. Is that safe? Kai asked, her archaeologist's caution asserting itself. Ancient technological awakening protocols often include defense mechanisms against unauthorized access. The celestial key should provide recognition parameters, Ester replied, though her tone held a note of uncertainty. According to our records, at least. That's reassuring, Ben remarked dryly, though without genuine complaint. Years of heroism had accustomed him to preceding WITH incomplete information when necessary. They prepared for the expedition to the center of the cradle, gathering specialized equipment and reinforcing their thermal protection. Throughout these preparations, Ben noticed the Omnitrix continuing to extend occasional exploratory filaments toward nearby technology, subtle and brief, but persistent. It's getting more curious, he observed as a delicate strand of light retracted from a communication device. Like it's cataloging everything electronic around it. The celestial technology was designed to learn through interaction, Ester explained. Checking the calibration on a thermal scanner. It's probably trying to update its understanding of current technology. Should we be concerned? Hope asked, her magical expertise making her particularly sensitive to autonomous systems. Not yet, Ester replied thoughtfully. But we should monitor the behavior. If it begins actual modification rather than observation. She didn't need to finish the thought. They all understood the potential risks of an ancient, semi-sentient device reprogramming modern technology without supervision. The journey to the center of the cradle took nearly an hour. Their progress slowed by increasingly unpredictable ice conditions. What had appeared stable from a distance revealed itself to be a complex network of shifting surfaces, responding to energy pulses from below. The ice is being restructured at the molecular level, Kai observed, her scanner detecting changes invisible to the naked eye. Something beneath is reorganizing the crystalline structure. As they approached the precise center, the Omnitrix's behavior changed dramatically. The exploratory filaments extended fully, creating a canopy of luminous threads above Ben's head. His threads began to pulse with patterns that painted ghostly images in the air, schematics, formulas, and symbols that appeared and disappeared too quickly for human comprehension. It's accessing memories, Ben realized. Receiving impressions rather than explicit communication from the device. This place holds significance to the Celestials. The ice beneath their feet suddenly became transparent, revealing a massive technological structure embedded deep below. Unlike any human design, the object appeared to be a perfect geodesic sphere composed of interlocking crystalline components, EAC. Etched with symbols similar to those now appearing on the Omnitrix. The nexus point, Ester breathed, recognition and awe-mingling in her voice. Our ancestral records mentioned it, but we never found conclusive evidence of its existence. What exactly is a nexus point? Ben asked, sensing the answer held crucial importance. A technological seed, Ester explained, her scientific understanding complemented by ancestral knowledge. The Celestials would plant these at locations of specific significance. When activated, they could generate entire technological ecosystems adapted to local conditions. A self-creating laboratory, Kai translated with academic precision. Fascinating. The transparent ice began to reconfigure around them, forming a perfect circular platform directly above the buried sphere. The Omnitrix's filaments extended downward, passing through the ice without disturbing it, making contact with the ancient technology below. The connection completed with a harmonic resonance that they felt rather than heard, a perfect vibrational alignment that momentarily synchronized all electronic devices in the vicinity. Displays flickered, recalibrated, then stabilized with enhanced resolution. Sensors recorded data with unprecedented precision. Even the fabric of their thermal suits seemed to reshape itself for optimal efficiency. Technological communion initiated. Came a voice, not from any person present, but from the Omnitrix itself. The words formed not through sound but through directly induced neural patterns, bypassing conventional sensory channels. Ben felt a strange doubling of his consciousness, still himself, but simultaneously aware of vast technological systems awakening beneath the ice. Information flowed into his mind in complex conceptual packages rather than linear thoughts. Ben. Hope's concerned voice seemed distant despite her physical proximity. Your eyes are changing, Kai finished, scientific observation overriding alarm. The irises are displaying the same patterns as the Omnitrix. He held up a hand to reassure them, finding it difficult to translate the complex informational download into simple language. I'm okay. It's sharing knowledge. The purpose of this place. The ice platform beneath them began to descend, passing through the seemingly solid surface as if it were merely a holographic projection. They found themselves entering a vast spherical chamber, the interior of the nexus point, illuminated by patterns of living light that flowed across every surface. Thermal equilibrium achieved, the neural voice continued. Proceeding to technological integration phase. That doesn't sound ominous at all. Ben managed through the continuing information flow, his normal personality reasserting itself despite the strange communion. The chamber responded to their presence, reconfiguring internal structures to create a central platform surrounded by holographic workstations. The technology was both impossibly advanced and strangely familiar, as if designed to be intuitive to human understanding despite its alien origins. This is incredible, Ester breathed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her leadership caution. A perfectly preserved celestial technological nexus. Not just preserved, Hope observed, her magical senses detecting subtle energy patterns. Evolving. It's been continuing its development in dormant state for millennia. The neural voice spoke again, this time with greater clarity. Celestial archive access protocols require multi-spectrum key authentication. Thermal spectrum authenticated. Proceeding to technological spectrum verification. Ben felt the Omnitrix warm slightly against his skin, its crystalline elements reconfiguring into new patterns. I think we just completed one part of the key, he translated for the others. But it needs more. The ancestral memories mentioned this, Ester confirmed. The archive's security requires authentication across multiple fundamental forces, thermal, technological, magical, and others. Which is why we need to keep seeking out these specific locations, Kai concluded, her archaeological mind constructing the historical pattern. Each provides a different aspect of authentication. The holographic workstations around them activated fully, displaying complex data structures that shifted and evolved even as they watched. One station in particular seemed to focus on the Omnitrix itself, displaying its internal architecture as an elaborate three-dimensional model. Technological integration assessment initiated, the neural voice announced. Current enhancement. 14% of optimal capacity. Only 14%. Ben couldn't help asking, the device on his wrist Ing already demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything he'd previously experienced. The celestial key's potential exceeds current integration parameters, the voice explained with mechanical precision. Nanoscale technological assimilation required for optimal function. The term triggered a memory in Ben's mind. Nanoscale technology, like nanites. The holographic display shifted in apparent response, showing microscopic machines integrated with organic and inorganic systems. The image reminded Ben of something, or rather, someone, from his past. Elena, he murmured, the connection forming in his mind. Elena Validus, the Nanite Queen, Hope recalled, the designation holding significantly less hostility than it might have years ago. Last intelligence suggested she had gained control over her transformation. She's established a research facility in Northern California, Kai added, her plumber connections providing up-to-date information. Studying technological symbiosis under controlled conditions. The Omnitrix pulsed in what Ben interpreted as confirmation, its filaments reconfiguring to display a geographical location in glowing blue light. I think we have our next destination, he concluded, watching as the coordinates for Elena's facility materialized in three-dimensional detail. The neural voice spoke once more, its tone shifting subtly toward urgency. Technological spectrum authentication requires nanite integration protocols. Without complete spectrum authentication, archive access remains prohibited. So we need Elena's expertise to complete the next step, Ben summarized. The complexity of the celestial security system becoming clearer. Each authentication requires specialized knowledge we don't possess alone. A deliberate safeguard, Ester noted with approval, ensuring no single individual or species could access the archive without collaboration. Their discussion was interrupted by an alert from the Kraho monitoring systems. Red warning indicators flashed across several displays simultaneously. Multiple unidentified vessels approaching, reported one of Ester's researchers through the communication system. Technolog. ICAL's signature matches previous temporal hunter configurations, but with significant modifications. Psychobos Prime, Ben concluded grimly. He's adapted his approach after the last encounter. E-Nexus Point's internal systems responded to the threat, displays shifting to show the approaching vessels, 7 sleek craft with distinctive cerebrocrustacean design elements, but modified with what appeared to be temporal displacement technology. Defensive protocols inactive, the neural voice reported with mechanical calm. Nexus Point designed for research, not warfare. Recommend immediate relocation of Celestial Key to prevent unauthorized access. Can we return to the surface? Hope asked, already preparing defensive spells that might delay pursuers. The holographic displays showed the vessels establishing positions that effectively surrounded the cradle, creating a net of overlapping sensor fields. Surface approach inadvisable, the neural voice assessed. Probability of interception, 97.8%. There must be another way out, Ben insisted, feeling the Omnitrix pulse with increasing urgency. These nexus points wouldn't be built without escape protocols. In apparent response, a section of the chamber wall reconfigured, revealing what appeared to be a transportation platform similar to a null void projector, but significantly more sophisticated. Emergency translocation system detected, the neural voice confirmed. Calibration required for contemporary geographic coordinates. Can it get us to Elena's facility directly? Ben asked, hope rising at this potential solution. Theoretically affirmative. Practical implementation requires technological spectrum access currently unavailable. In other words, we need Elena's help to fully activate the very system that would take us to Elena, Kai translated with a hint of frustration. Circular logic at its finest. Maybe not, Ben replied, an idea forming as he studied the translocation platform. The Omnitrix has already demonstrated partial technological integration capabilities. What if we use that as a bridge? Risky, Hope cautioned, though her tone suggested consideration rather than rejection. Partial integration could result in incomplete translocation. Incomplete how? Ben asked, needing to understand the specific risks. Best case scenario. Spatial displacement by several kilometers from intended target, Ester explained, her scientific knowledge translating the magical concern. Worst case. Molecular displacement across multiple locations simultaneously. So we either miss our target or arrive as scattered atoms, Ben summarized grimly. Great options. The alert systems intensified as the vessels began deploying what appeared to be drilling mechanisms designed to penetrate the ice barrier protecting the nexus point. Time for decision shrinking rapidly, Kai observed with practical urgency. Psychobos Prime will reach us within 15 minutes at current drilling velocity. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix, feeling its pulse synchronize with his accelerating heartbeat. Can you make this work? He asked it directly, no longer feeling self-conscious about addressing the device as a semi-sentient entity. The crystalline elements reconfigured, displaying patterns that somehow communicated confidence despite the absence of explicit language. The exploratory filaments extended toward the translocation platform, interfacing with its control systems in delicate, precise connections. Partial calibration possible, the neural voice assessed. Technological integration at current levels permits approximate targeting with 78% accuracy. Meaning we could end up within, a few miles of Alina's facility? Ben asked, weighing the odds against their dwindling alternatives. Correct. Precise calibration impossible without nanite integration protocols. Ben looked to his companions, respecting their right to participate in the decision. It's not just my risk to take. Thoughts. Ester considered the options with a leader's pragmatism. My people can delay Psychobo's prime temporarily, giving me to reach Elena and complete the technological authentication. The Kraho outpost has defensive capabilities we haven't revealed to outsiders. You'd stay behind? Ben asked, concern evident in his voice. This is my territory and my responsibility, she replied with quiet authority. And strategically, dividing our group complicates our enemy's targeting priorities. Hope nodded in reluctant agreement. She's right. And having a Kraho leader here might confuse Psychobos about which of us carries the celestial key. I should remain as well, Kai decided after brief consideration. My archaeological knowledge might help interpret the Nexus Point's historical data while you complete the technological authentication. Ben felt uncomfortable with the division but recognized the strategic logic. So Hope and I go to find Elena while you two hold down the fort here. And gather critical intelligence from the Nexus Point, Kai added, already moving toward the holographic workstat. Ions with academic enthusiasm barely contained. The translocation will be safer with fewer participants, the neural voice confirmed dispassionately. Current integration levels can ensure higher accuracy for 2 subjects than 4. Decision made, they moved quickly to implement their plan. Ester communicated with her outpost, coordinating defensive preparations while extracting promises that Ben clearly intended to keep: communication protocols, emergency extraction plans, and contingencies for worst-case scenarios. Hope prepared protective spells designed to shield them during translocation, her hands weaving complex patterns that left lingering magenta traces in the air. This should provide some stability during the transition, she explained, completing a final sigil that settled over Ben like an invisible cloak. Magical dimensional anchoring to prevent excessive spatial drift. Ben felt the Omnitrix continuing to interface with the translocation platform, the connection growing stronger as the device adapted to the ancient technology. The filaments had transformed from exploratory tendrils into a complex network that pulsed with increasing confidence. Calibration at maximum potential for current integration level, the neural voice announced. Target locked within probable radius of 8.4 kilometers. Initiating translocation in 30 seconds. Ester approached as final preparations completed, her leader's composure momentarily softening. Be careful, Ben. The celestial key is changing you in ways beyond the obvious transformations. Good changes are bad? He asked, only half joking. Her expression grew thoughtful. Different. The ancestral memories will help guide you, but ultimately, you'll need to determine how much integration is too much. He nodded, understanding the deeper concern behind her warning. I'll remember what I learned in the thermal meditation. This is about understanding, not just power. 10 seconds to translocation, the neural voice interjected. Hope joined them on the platform, her protective spells creating a faintly shimmering field around them both. We'll contact you once we've reached Elena, Ben promised Ester and Kai. And return as soon as possible. Focus on completing the technological authentication, Kai advised practically. We'll manage here. 5 seconds. The translocation platform hummed with increasing energy. Crystalline components vibrating at frequencies that made vision slightly blurry. 3. Ben felt the Omnitrix pulse in perfect synchronization with the platform. 2. Ester raised her hand in a gesture of farewell that somehow conveyed both authority and personal concern. 1. The world dissolved into streams of data, not the familiar sensation of teleportation. But something more fundamental, as if their very molecular structure was being converted to information and back again. Ben experienced a momentary expansion of consciousness, perceiving multiple potential arrival points simultaneously before reality abruptly reasserted itself. They materialized in a dense forest, morning sunlight filtering through redwood canopies hundreds of feet above. The transition had been smoother than expected. No disorientation, no physical discomfort, just the sudden replacement of Antarctic white with California green. That was, Hope began, taking stock of their surroundings with professional assessment. Efficient, Ben finished, surprised by the precision of the transport despite the warned limitations. I was expecting worse. Hope's magical senses extended outward, scanning their environment. We're approximately 3 miles from significant technological concentrations. Likely Alina's facility. The Omnitrix pulsed with confirmation, a directional indicator materializing above its surface like a miniature holographic compass. At least we have GPS, Ben remarked, starting in the indicated direction. How current is your information about Elena? It's been years since I've had any contact. Hope kept pace easily, her athletic conditioning evident despite her scholarly focus in recent years. Intelligence reports suggest she's achieved remarkable control over the nanite swarm that once threatened to consume her identity. Her research now focuses on technological symbiosis, the integration of nanite technology with biological systems. Controlled integration, Ben noted, the parallel to his current situation with the Omnitrix immediately apparent. That's why the Celestial Key is directing us to her. She's already solving the problems we're facing. With considerably more scientific methodology than your usual transform and figure it out approach, Hope observed with a hint of her old sardonic humor. Ben laughed, recognizing the accuracy of her assessment. Fair point. Though in my defense, crisis situations don't usually allow for detailed experimental protocols. Their banter continued as they navigated the forest, establishing a comfortable rhythm that reflected their evolved relationship from former adversaries to reluctant allies to something approaching genuine friendship. Years of shared NCES, both collaborative and confrontational, had created a foundation of mutual respect beneath their surface differences. After nearly an hour's hike, they reached the edge of the forest where the landscape opened to reveal a surprisingly modest research compound. Rather than the imposing security one might expect around cutting-edge technology, Alina's facility appeared almost deliberately unassuming. A cluster of low buildings integrated with the natural environment, solar panels disguised as architectural elements, and gardens that served both aesthetic and practical purposes. Not what I expected, Ben admitted as they approached the main entrance. I was thinking more secret high-tech lab, and less eco-friendly research retreat. Sometimes the most effective security is appearing to have nothing worth securing. Hope observed with the wisdom of someone who had maintained hidden magical sanctums. As they reached the entrance, a simple door with a sophisticated but unobtrusive scanning system, the Omnitrix's behavior changed dramatically. The exploratory filaments extended with unprecedented enthusiasm, reaching toward the facility's technology with what Ben could only interpret as eagerness. Whoa, easy there, he murmured to the device, feeling its excitement as a tangible sensation against his skin. Let's not hack Alina's security before we even say hello. The scanner activated as they approached, a soft blue light passing over them both before the door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. No alarms, no armed guards, no dramatic security protocols, just simple, efficient recognition. She was expecting us, Hope realized, her magical senses detecting no deception or trap. Or at least expecting something, Ben agreed, noting the scanner's particular interest in the Omnitrix. They entered a reception area that continued the theme of understated sophistication, natural materials complemented by subtle technology that revealed itself only upon closer inspection. The walls themselves appeared to be monitoring environmental conditions, adjusting temperature and light with imperceptible precision. A figure emerged from an adjacent corridor, not Elena herself, but a young woman with distinctive blue-tinted skin and eyes that held an unusual reflective quality. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that suggested technological enhancement. Ben Tennyson and Hope Charmcaster. She greeted them with professional courtesy. Dr. Validus anticipated your arrival after the Antarctic energy signature registered on our systems. Please follow me. Ben and Hope exchanged glances, both noting the interesting detail that their Antarctic activities had been detected from thousands of miles away. Alina's monitoring capabilities were evidently more sophisticated than most government agencies. They followed their guide through corridors where science and nature achieved remarkable balance, laboratory spaces open to interior gardens, research equipment, and incorporated living plants as components, and everywhere, subtle evidence of nanite technology integrated with organic systems. The guide led them to a central laboratory where a familiar figure stood before a holographic display showing complex molecular structures in continuous evolution. Elena Validus had changed significantly since Ben had last seen her. Her once dark hair now contained distinctive silver streaks that seemed to shift position subtly. Her movements carried fluid precision that hinted at enhanced reflexes, and when she turned to greet them, her eyes held the same reflective quality as their guides, though more pronounced. Ben Tennyson, she acknowledged with a smile that contained genuine warmth beneath scientific curiosity. Still finding yourself at the center of cosmic anomalies, I see. Her gaze shifted. And hope, your magical signature has evolved impressively since our last interaction. Elena, Ben replied, momentarily struck by how much she had changed while remaining recognizably herself. You're looking integrated. She laughed, a sound somehow both human and enhanced simultaneously. Diplomatically phrased. Yes, the nanite swarm and I have achieved what you might call a mutually beneficial arrangement. She gestured to her body with scientific detachment. Approximately 40% of my cellular structure now consists of programmable nanite colonies operating in perfect symbiosis with my biological systems. Remarkable, Hope acknowledged with professional appreciation. The magical binding properties alone must be unprecedented. They are, Elena confirmed, her expression suggesting pleasant surprise at Hope's technical understanding. We've discovered that certain magical frequencies can synchronize nanite reproductive cycles without damaging their programming integrity. Ben watched this exchange with appreciation for how far they had all evolved from their teenage conflicts. Elena, once consumed by nanite-driven O.B. session, now discussed her transformation with academic precision. Hope, formerly focused solely on magical power, now recognized the scientific implications of integrated systems. The Omnitrix Interu PTED his reflection by suddenly extending its filaments toward Elena, reaching with what appeared to be enthusiastic recognition. The tendrils of light stopped just short of actual contact, hovering in the air between them. And there's the reason for your visit, Elena observed, studying the Omnitrix with professional interest. Celestial technology, partially integrated with Azimuth's derivative design. Fascinating. You recognize it? Ben asked, surprised by her immediate identification. The nanite collective memory contains records dating back to their original creation, she explained. Approaching to study the device more closely without actually touching it. The Celestials were pioneers in programmable matter technology. Many consider them the original creators of what eventually evolved into modern nanites. The Omnitrix's filaments responded to her proximity with increased activity, creating complex patterns in the air that resembled molecular structures. It wants to communicate with you, Ben translated, receiving impressions from the device. Or more specifically, with your nanites. Elena nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Celestial technology operates on a semi-sentient recognition system. It identifies compatible technological paradigms and attempts to establish communion. She extended her hand toward the filaments, stopping just short of contact. May I? Ben hesitated, remembering Ester's warning about integration. It's been enthusiastic about connecting with technology. I'm not sure what will happen. That's why you're here, Elena deduced with scientific precision. The celestial key requires nanite integration to complete its technological authentication spectrum, but you're concerned about uncontrolled assimilation. Exactly, Hope confirmed, impressed by her immediate understanding. The Antarctic nexus point indicated that nanoscale technological integration is necessary for optimal function, but unregulated integration could potentially compromise both the Omnitrix and whatever technology it connects with, Elena finished, her enhanced mind processing the implications rapidly. A legitimate concern. Celestial technology was designed to learn through assimilation, but modern systems aren't necessarily compatible with its adaptive protocols. The Omnitrix pulsed with what Ben interpreted as impatience, its filaments creating increasingly complex patterns between them. I think it disagrees with your caution, he remarked, feeling the device's eagerness as a tangible sensation. Elena smiled with understanding. Of course it does. From its perspective, technological communion is natural and beneficial. The concept of incompatibility would be alien to its core programming. She gestured to a specialized laboratory area where the integration of technology and biology was even more pronounced. Equipment there seemed to grow from the floor rather than being constructed, and holographic displays showed nanite behaviors at microscopic scale. We should approach this systematically, she suggested, her scientific methodology evident. Controlled integration under monitored conditions will allow us to establish parameters for safe communion. As they moved toward the specialized lab, Ben noticed subtle security measures activating around them, not threatening, but definitely present. Elena caught his observation and nodded in acknowledgement. Precautionary protocols, she explained unapologetically. What we're about to attempt carries certain risks worth mitigating. The laboratory contained what appeared to be a containment chamber designed specifically for technological isolation and controlled testing. Its transparent walls displayed continuous data streams monitoring conditions both inside and outside the enclosure. This environment will allow us to establish a regulated connection between the celestial key and our nanite systems, Elena explained, activating the chamber with a gesture that demonstrated her direct neural interface with the facility's technology. Hope studied the chamber with both magical and scientific assessment. You've incorporated magical containment principles into the design, necessary for full-spectrum isolation, Elena confirmed, making final adjustments to the system parameters. Nanite behavior can't be contained through conventional means alone. Ben approached the chamber, feeling the Omnitrix's anticipation growing with each step. What exactly will happen in there? Controlled technological communion, Elena replied, her enhanced eyes monitoring data streams visible only to her. The celestial key will establish connection with a segregated nanite colony, not my personal system, but a research group we maintain specifically for integration experiments. The distinction relieved Ben's unspoken concern about potential effects on Elena herself. And this will help complete the technological authentication the Nexus Point mentioned. If the ancient protocols remain consistent, yes. Elena gestured to the chamber's access point, which opened with silent precision. You'll need to place your arm with the Omnitrix inside while I introduce the nanite colony from a separate access point. Ben hesitated only briefly before extending his arm into the chamber, trusting Elena's expertise despite the inherent risks. The Omnitrix's filaments extended immediately, creating an elaborate network within the confined space, as if preparing for contact. Elena activated a secondary system, causing a metallic cylinder to extend into the chamber from the opposite side. Nanite colony NK-479 responding to introduction protocols, she reported, monitoring the data with scientific detachment. Specialized for technological interface and data preservation. The cylinder opened, releasing what appeared to be a silver mist that coalesced into a pulsing sphere approximately 6 inches in diameter. Unlike the aggressive nanites Ben remembered from their teenage encounters, this colony maintained perfect cohesion, displaying what appeared to be intentional restraint. Initiating controlled communion in 3, 2, 1. The nanite sphere extended tendrils of its own, mirror images of the Omnitrix's filaments, creating a symmetrical pattern that slowly closed the distance between them. When the two sets of filaments finally touched, the contact point flared with blue-white light that rapidly expanded throughout both networks. Ben gasped as information flooded through the Omnitrix into his consciousness, not painful, but overwhelming in its complexity and scope. He received impressions of technological evolution spanning millennia, compressed into seconds of direct experiential understanding. The Omnitrix itself was changing, the crystalline elements reconfiguring to incorporate nanoscale components that hadn't been visible before. Its surface developed new patterns that shifted with fluid precision, resembling circuitry but organized according to principles beyond conventional electronic design. Remarkable, Elena breathed, her enhanced senses perceiving changes invisible to normal human perception. The celestial architecture is reawakening dormant nanite programming that predates our earliest records. Hope monitored the process from a magical perspective, tracing the energy flows with practiced precision. The integration pattern is establishing dimensional anchors at the quantum level. It's not just combining technologies, it's harmonizing their fundamental vibrational states. The communion continued for several minutes, the nanite colony gradually diminishing as it transferred both matter and information to the Omnitrix. When the process finally completed, the device had visibly transformed, its surface now featuring microscopic structures that shifted like living circuitry, adapting continuously to invisible stimuli. Technological spectrum authentication achieved, announced a voice. Not the neutral tones of the nexus point, but a more evolved synthesis that incorporated elements of both mechanical precision and organic nuance. Nanite integration protocols established at optimal parameters. Ben withdrew his arm from the chamber, examining the transformed Omnitrix with mixture of fascination and caution. It feels more present somehow, more connected to everything around it. The nanite integration provides continuous environmental interfacing capabilities, Elena explained, studying the results with scientific appreciation. It's now constant, analyzing and adapting to technological systems within its detection range. Is that safe? Hope asked, the practical question reflecting her evolved approach to power. Within established parameters, yes, Elena replied, though her expression suggested important qualifications. The communion established regulatory protocols that should prevent uncontrolled assimilation. However, she added with scientific candor, celestial technology was designed to evolve beyond its initial constraints. Ongoing monitoring would be advisable. Ben flexed his hand, feeling the Omnitrix respond with unprecedented sensitivity to his movements. It's definitely more responsive now, almost anticipating what I'm thinking. Neural interface capabilities would be enhanced by nanite integration, Elena confirmed, gesturing toward a more comprehensive scanning system. May I? Ben extended his arm again, allowing her to conduct a more detailed analysis of the transformed device. Advanced holographic displays materialized around them, showing the Omnitrix's internal architecture in microscopic detail. The nanite colonies have established themselves throughout the primary systems, Elena observed, manipulating the display to highlight specific areas. They're serving as both enhancement and translation layers between the celestial technology and Azimuth's design. Like technological interpreters, Ben suggested. Finding the concept helped him visualize the complex integration. Precisely, Elena confirmed, pleased by his understanding. The celestial architecture operates on principles that transcend conventional electronics. The nanites bridge that conceptual gap, allowing the systems to communicate effectively. Hope studied the display with growing concern, her magical sense detecting something beyond the technological aspects. There's another layer to this integration. The nanites aren't just enhancing the technology, they're facilitating deeper connection with the wielder. Elena nodded, her own enhanced senses confirming this assessment. Biofeedback pathways are being established at the cellular level. The communion isn't limited to the device itself, it's extending to Ben's biological systems. Meaning what, exactly? Ben asked, the implications raising legitimate concerns. Meaning the distinction between you and the Omnitrix is becoming less defined. Elena explained with scientific precision. The celestial technology was designed for complete integration with its chosen wielder, not merely as a tool, but as an evolutionary partner. The revelation should have been more alarming. But Ben found himself unsurprised. The ancestral memories from the cryothermal meditation had prepared him for this possibility. The Celestials viewed transformation technology as a path to understanding, not merely a tool for combat or convenience. That tracks with what we learned in Antarctica, he acknowledged. The celestial key isn't just upgrading the Omnitrix, it's upgrading me. Which raises important questions about acceptable parameters, Elena noted, her own experience with technological integration giving her unique perspective. Complete SIM. Iosis offers remarkable capabilities but requires careful boundary establishment to preserve identity. Her words carried the weight of personal experience, having nearly lost herself to nanite consum. PTION before establishing the balanced integration she now maintained. How do you manage it? Ben asked, genuinely curious about her evolved relationship with the technology that had once threatened to consume her. Elena considered the question thoughtfully. Through conscious intention and established protocols. The nanites and I have negotiated boundaries, areas where each has primary authority. Why and others where consensus is required. She smiled slightly. It's less like wearing technology and more like an ongoing conversation. Before Ben could respond, security alerts suddenly activated throughout the facility. Displays shifted to show external monitoring data, revealing multiple craft approaching rapidly from different directions. Perimeter breach imminent, announced an automated system. Unknown technological signatures detected. Hostility assessment. 97% probability. Alina's expression shifted from scientific curiosity to tactical focus with remarkable speed. My security systems detected unusual temporal disturbances in the upper atmosphere 20 minutes ago. It seems we have company. Holographic displays showed 12 approaching vessels, NT from those they'd encountered in Antarctica, but with similar cerebrocrustacean design elements merged with temporal technology. Psychobo's prime works fast, Ben remarked grimly. He must have tracked us from the translocation. The temporal signature would have been detectable to sufficiently advanced monitoring systems, Elena confirmed, already activating defensive protocols with neural commands too rapid for conventional input. My facility has certain countermeasures, but nothing specifically designed for temporal technology. I can supplement your defenses with temporal disruption spells, Hope offered. Her hands already weaving complex magical patterns. They won't stop the attack, but might create interference with their targeting systems. The Omnitrix pulsed against Ben's skin, its newly integrated nanite components creating patterns that somehow communicated strategic assessment rather than mere data. He received impressions of potential transformations specifical L.Y. calibrated to counter temporal technology. I think the Omnitrix has some ideas about defense, he reported, feeling the device cycling through evolutionary matrices with unprecedented precision. The nanite integration would enhance its tactical analysis capabilities, Elena confirmed, continuing her defensive preparations without pausing. Celestial technology was designed to adapt to threats through evolutionary response. The approaching vessels accelerated, deploying what appeared to be temporal disruption fields designed to freeze defensive systems in relative time while allowing offensive weapons to function normally. They're attempting to create temporal bubbles around key defensive nodes, Elena observed, her enhanced perception allowing her to track the attack pattern. CL. Ever approach, isolate and neutralize rather than brute force. Can your systems counter that strategy? Hope asked, completing a protective spell that encased the central laboratory in a magenta energy field. Not directly, Elena admitted without apparent concern. But adaptation is what we do best here. As if in response to her confidence, the very walls of the facility began to shift, nanite. Enhanced materials reconfiguring to create new defensive structures. What had appeared to be decorative elements revealed themselves as sophisticated weapons systems emerging from concealed positions. Molecular reorganization defenses activated, Elena announced, her voice carrying harmonic undertones as she interfaced more deeply with the facility's systems. Nanite swarms deploying to counter temporal positions. The first wave of attacks struck the outer perimeter, temporal disruption fields that should have frozen the defensive systems in time. Instead, the nanite-enhanced structures simply flowed around the affected areas, reconfiguring to maintain function despite localized temporal stasis. That's impressive, Ben acknowledged, watching the nanites adapt to conditions that should have been impossible to counter with conventional technology. Nanites exist partially outside normal temporal flow, Elena explained while continuing to coordinate the defense. Their reproductive cycle occurs at quantum speeds, allowing new generations to replace those affected by temporal weapons almost instantaneously. Despite this impressive initial defense, the attacking forces adjusted their strategy with concerning speed. New weapons deployed from the vessels, not temporal disruptors this time, but devices that emitted precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses designed to disrupt nanite communication patterns. Phase 2 countermeasures, Elena identified, her expression showing professional respect for the sophisticated attack. They've studied nanite vulnerabilities extensively. The EMP weapons proved partially effective, creating zones where the nanite defenses temporarily lost cohesion. The attacking vessels immediately targeted these weakened areas, deploying what appeared to be boarding mechanisms. They're attempting physical infiltration, Hope observed, redirecting her magical defenses to counter this new approach. As expected, Elena replied with tactical composure. The primary objective appears to be capture rather than destruction. Ben felt the Omnitrix pulse with increasing urgency, its transformed interface displaying new evolutionary metric specifically calibrated for the current threat. Time to get involved, I think. He activated the device, feeling the transformation process flow with unprecedented smoothness, no longer the familiar energy rush, but a precisely controlled molecular reconfiguration enhanced by nanite precision. Where upgrade might have manifested in his previous experience, now emerged something far beyond, a being composed of living technological matter that existed simultaneously at macro and nano scales. His form shifted between solid manifestation and dispersed nanite cloud with perfect control, and the distinctive circuit patterns that flowed across his surface now extended beyond his physical boundaries, interfacing with nearby technology without direct contact. Interface, he named himself, his voice carrying digital harmonics that transmitted data alongside sound. Celestial upgrade. Elena studied his transformed state with scientific fascination. Complete technological integration at the quantum level. You're not just controlling technology, you're communicating with it on its native terms. Interface extended his consciousness through the facility's systems, experiencing Elena's defenses as extensions of himself. The sensation was remarkable. Not merely controlling technology as upgrade would have, but participating in its existence, understanding its purpose and potential from within. I can see their attack pattern, he realized, perceiving the infiltration strategy through multiple sensory channels simultaneously. They're creating a distraction at the perimeter while ending specialized infiltration units through subterranean approaches. Elena nodded, unsurprised by his assessment. Already detected. Subsurface defenses engaged. The floor beneath them briefly liquefied as nanite defenses flowed downward to counter the underground threat, reshaping into more effective barrier configurations. The primary vessel carries a more sophisticated temporal signature than the others, Hope observed. Her magical senses detecting distinctions invisible to conventional scanning. Likely Psychobos Prime himself rather than a proxy. Interface extended his awareness toward this vessel, attempting to interface with its systems from a distance. The connection established more easily than expected, his enhanced form allowing technological communion across significant distances. What he discovered sent a pulse of alarm through his integrated systems. He's deploying a temporal fracture device, designed to create a localized reality split that would separate the Omnitrix from its wielder by placing each in different temporal frequencies. Theoretically impossible, Elena responded, though her expression suggested she took the threat seriously nonetheless. Quantum entanglement between wielder and device would prevent clean separation. Unless, Hope realized with growing concern, the separation targets the moment of transformation itself, the precise instant when matter converts between forms. Interface processed this possibility, finding it disturbingly plausible. We need to neutralize that device before it activates. Direct confrontation unadvisable, Elena assessed. Her tactical systems calculating probable outcomes. 87% probability of triggering premature activation if approached conventionally. Then we don't approach conventionally, Interface decided. His nanite-enhanced mind-developing strategy at accelerated rates. We create our own temporal countermeasure. He extended filaments of living technology toward Elena, stopping just short of direct contact. Your facility's nanite systems, can they be temporarily reprogrammed for coordinated action? She understood immediately, her enhanced mind following his strategic reasoning. A distributed temporal buffer using nanite oscillation patterns. Theoretical but never implemented. Despite the experimental nature, her expression showed confidence. Yes, with your integration capabilities as a coordination nexus, it's possible. Hope grasped the approach from a magical perspective. I can establish dimensional anchoring points to stabilize the buffer. Prevent temporal slippage during implementation. Their three specialties, Ben's enhanced transformation, Elena's nanite expertise, and Hope's magical knowledge, created a perfect synergy for countering the unique threat. They worked with remarkable coordination, each contributing essential elements to the defense. Interface extended his technological consciousness throughout the facility, creating a network that linked previously independent nanite colonies into a unified system. Elena provided the precise programming parameters needed for temporal buffer generation, her intimate understanding of nanite behavior allowing for unprecedented synchronization. Hope established magical stability points at key locations, ensuring the buffer remained coherent despite temporal manipulation attempts. Outside, Psychobos Prime's forces pressed their attack with increasing coordination. evidence that the enhanced cerebrocrustacean was personally directing the assault. Defensive systems held BU. Chi showed signs of eventual failure against the sophisticated temporal weapons. Buffer network at 60% completion, interface reported, maintaining the complex coordination with effort that would have been impossible in his previous forms. Need another 3 minutes for minimum effectiveness. Perimeter defenses failing at sectors 7 through 12, Elena reported simultaneously. Her connection to the facility's systems providing real-time assessment. Infiltration units breaching secondary barriers. Hope completed another anchoring spell before responding. 2 minutes as a LL we have before physical confrontation becomes unavoidable. The situation deteriorated rapidly as Psychobos Prime employed increasingly sophisticated temporal attacks. Sections of the facility beg and experiencing localized time distortions, some accelerating, others slowing to near stasis. He's attempting to disrupt our coordination by placing us in different temporal frames, Elena assessed. Her enhanced physiology allowing her to partially compensate for the fluctuations. Interface adapted to these disruptions by distributing his consciousness across multiple nanite clusters operating in different temporal frames. Maintaining coordination despite the increasingly fragmented time flow. BB buffer network inadequate, came a familiar stuttering voice through the communication systems. As Psychobos Prime hijacked their frequencies. Your PP primitive understanding of temporal mechanics is almost amusing, Tennyson. Interface refused to be distracted by the taunt, continuing the B. Buffer network implementation with methodical precision. Almost there. Keep him talking. Hope took up the challenge, addressing the cerebrocrustacean with deliberate provocative confidence. For someone with supposedly superior intellect, your approach shows remarkable unoriginality. Temporal fracture devices were theorized by Galvan scientists centuries ago. The strategy worked, triggering Ps. Y. Chobos Prime's well-known sensitivity to Galvan comparisons. Inferior Galvan PP postulations bear no resemblance to my temporal mastery. Their crude hypotheses failed to account for multidimensions. Ional feedback loops that my design elegantly resolves. As he continued his indignant explanation, Interface completed the buffer network implementation, nanite colonies throughout the facility. Synchronizing at quantum levels to create a cohesive temporal field independent of normal spacetime. Buffer active, he announced, feeling the protection envelope them just as Psychobos Prime realized his error. No, the cerebrocrustacean's outraged cry came simultaneously with the activation of his temporal fracture device, a pulse of sickly yellow energy that expanded outward from his vessel, enveloping the facility in what should have been reality-splitting force. Instead, the pulse fragmented against the nanite buffer, its energy dispersing harmlessly across millions of quantum synchro NIST points that absorbed and neutralized the temporal effect. Impossible. Psychobos Prime's rage transmitted clearly despite the communication system's partial failure. The calculation was PP perfect. But the understanding was flawed, Interface replied, his technological consciousness extending beyond the facility's boundaries now, reaching toward the cerebrocrustacean's vessel itself. You analyzed the Omnitrix based on its previous parameters, not its current integration state. With newfound confidence in his enhanced capabilities, Interface extended nanite filaments directly toward the primary vessel, establishing connection despite its sophisticated shielding. The contact created a technological communion similar to what he'd experienced with Elena's research colony, but WH. Air that had been cooperative and controlled, this was confrontational and invasive. He found himself in direct mental contact with Psychobos Prime, the enhanced cerebrocrustacean's multiple brain maw. Tracy's firing in patterns of frustrated calculation as he attempted to comprehend his failure. The celestial key was never meant for primitive organic minds, Psychobos Prime communicated directly. His mental voice lacking the characteristic stutter present in his verbal expression. Its integration potential with a cerebrocrustacean nervous system would exponentially exceed your limited human neurological capacity. Interface perceived the truth behind this claim, not in the implied superiority, but in the genuine difference. You're right that it would create a different integration pattern with your physiology. But different doesn't necessarily mean better. He sensed Psychobos Prime's genuine belief in his own superiority, not merely egotistical posturing but deep-seated conviction based on calculated probability. The cerebrocrustacean truly believed himself the optimal wielder for celestial technology. The key chose Ben. Interface communicated with certainty born of the ancestral memories and his own growing understanding of the celestial philosophy. Not because humans are superior, but because specific attributes were sought: adaptability, empathy, balance between intellect and intuition. Psychobos Prime's multiple brain matrices rejected this explanation with calculated disdain. Sentimental justification for random selection. The key responded to proximity, not quality. Rather than continuing the philosophical debate, Interface utilized the connection to access the vessel's systems directly, disabling weapons and navigation with precise nanite infiltration. The cerebrocrustacean detected the intrusion immediately, attempting to sever the connection with emergency protocols. This confrontation is temporally inconclusive, Psychobos Prime declared, echoing Temporis Prime's retreat phraseology while activating emergency displacement technology. But the statistical inevitability of my success remains unchanged. The vessel and its accompanying forces vanished in a flash of yellow energy, temporal displacement carrying them beyond Interface's immediate reach. The abrupt disconnection caused feedback that momentarily disrupted his integrated consciousness, forcing him to consolidate his distributed awareness back into cohesive form. As the immediate threat receded, Interface reverted to human form, the transformation release sending nanite pulses rippling through the facility before settling back into the Omnitrix. The device itself had evolved further, its surface now featuring microscopic structures that continuously reconfigured in response to surrounding technology. That was, Ben began, finding words inadequate to describe the experience of distributed technological consciousness. Complete technological communion, Elena finished for him. Her understanding based on personal experience with similar integration. You weren't just controlling technology, you were participating in its existence. Hope completed a final protective spell before joining their discussion. The magical resonance patterns have changed as well. Your transformation created harmonics across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. Ben looked down at the transformed Omnitrix, feeling its new capabilities as extensions of his own consciousness rather than merely tools at his disposal. The nanite integration has definitely taken things to another level. I could perceive systems from within rather than just interfacing with them. The technological spectrum authentication is complete, Elena confirmed, her enhanced senses detecting the change in the Omnitrix's operational parameters. The celestial key has successfully incorporated nanite integration protocols into its core architecture. Which means we can access the archive? Ben asked, remembering their original purpose. Partially, Elena clarified, scientific precision evident in her explanation. According to my understanding of celestial security protocols, each spectrum authentication provides access to different aspects of the archive. Technological integration allows interface with its information systems but not necessarily its dimensional coordinates. We still need the remaining authentications, Hope concluded with pragmatic assessment. Magical, gravitational, and possibly others we haven't yet identified. Ben nodded, processing this info. Mashing while considering their next steps. We should contact Ester and Kai, let them know we've completed the technological authentication. Then figure out where we need to go for the next spectrum. Elena studied him with scientific curiosity combined with personal concern. Before you proceed, there's something you should understand about the nanite integration process. It's not merely enhancing the Omnitrix, it's facilitating deeper connection between the device and your biological systems. Hope mentioned something similar earlier, Ben recalled, meeting her gaze directly. What exactly are the implications? Elena considered her response carefully, clearly weighing scientific precision against comprehensibility. Based on my own experience with nanite integration, the process creates pathways that blur the distinction between technology and biology. The celestial key isn't simply transforming you temporarily, it's establishing permanent enhancements to your baseline human form. You mean I'm changing even when not transformed? Ben asked, the concept both fascinating and concerning. Precisely, Elena confirmed. Subtle adaptations are occurring at the cellular level, enhanced neural processing, accelerated healing, improved sensory perception. Nothing dramatic enough to be immediately apparent, but cumulatively significant. Ben absorbed this information, finding Chi aligned with impressions he'd been receiving from the Omnitrix itself, a sense of continuous evolution rather than discrete transformation states. Is it dangerous? Hope asked the practical question, her concern evident despite her typically reserved demeanor. Not inherently, Elena replied with scientific care. The integration appears remarkably stable and controlled. However, she added with characteristic precision, the process is progressive. Each new spectrum authentication will likely accelerate the integration, eventually reaching a threshold where distinction between wielder and technology becomes philosophical rather than physical. The implications were profound. Not merely wielding the celestial key, but potentially becoming something new through symbiotic evolution with it. Ben found the concept simultaneously exhilarating and sobering. Do I need to make a decision about continuing? He asked, wanting clarity on the practical question beneath the philosophical implications. Elena smiled slightly, recognizing the mature consideration behind his question. The decision point isn't immediate. Current integration levels remain well within reversible parameters. BU. Chi full archive access will likely require integration levels approaching irreversibility. Meaning at some point, I'll need to choose whether to complete the process or step back, Ben translated, appreciating her straightforward assessment. Exactly, Elena confirmed, and that choice should be made with complete understanding of the implications. Hope watched this exchange with thoughtful assessment. The ancestral memories from the Kraho, did they provide any insight into this aspect of celestial integration? Ben considered the question, sifting through impressions from the thermal meditation. They showed representatives who underwent similar processes. Some maintained distinction between themselves and the technology, others embraced fuller integration. It seemed to be a personal choice rather than a predetermined path. Consistent with celestial philosophy as I understand it, Elena noted with approval. Their approach to technology was based on cooperative evolution rather than utilitarian application. Their discussion was interrupted by an alert from Elena's communication systems. Not an alarm this time, but a notification of incoming transmission. Signal from Antarctica, she reported. Activating a holographic display, encrypted using plumber protocols but modified with what appears to be cryothermal encoding. The display resolved to show Ester's image, her expression conveying urgency despite her composed demeanor. Ben, Hope, situation update required. The Nexus Point has initiated what appears to be a comprehensive awakening sequence following your successful authentication. Kai believes it's attempting to establish connection with other celestial sites worldwide. The technological authentication must have triggered a network activation protocol, Elena theorized. Studying the data accompanying Ester's transmission. Is that dangerous? Ben asked, concerned for their friends in Antarctica. Not immediately, Ester replied, having overheard the question. But it's drawing attention. We've detected multiple approaching signatures, not just psychobos this time, but what appear to be Chronosian observers as well. The stakes are escalating, Hope observed grimly. Multiple factions converging as the celestial network reactivates. Ester's transmission continued, providing crucial new information. The Nexus Point's awakening has revealed coordinates for the next authentication site, a location in the Marianas Trench where gravitational anomalies have been recorded for centuries. According to the data, gravitational spectrum authentication is required to progress further toward archive access. The deepest point in Earth's oceans, Kai's voice added from off-screen. Approximately 11 kilometers below sea level, creating unique gravitational conditions due to mass distribution and planetary rotation effects. We'll need specialized transportation, Ben concluded, already considering the practical challenges of reaching such an extreme environment. An expertise in gravitational phenomena, Hope added thoughtfully. The authentication likely requires more than just reaching the location. Elena entered he conversation with characteristic pragmatism. I can provide transportation. My research includes deep ocean nanite colonies studying pressure adaptations. We maintain specialized vessels designed for extreme depth conditions. An expertise? Ester asked through the transmission. Ben and Hope exchanged glances, both arriving at the same conclusion simultaneously. Julie, Ben stated with certainty. Julie Yamamoto has been studying exobiology in gravitational extreme environments for her doctoral work. If anyone understands how biology adapts to gravitational anomalies, it's her. The Mention of Julie, another person from Ben's past with whom he shared complicated history, created a momentary shift in the conversational dynamic. Ester's expression revealed brief but noticeable recalibration, while Alina's scientific detachment wavered slightly before reasserting itself. Logical selection based on required expertise, Ester acknowledged with professional composure that didn't quite mask personal recollection. Her research on gravitational effects on xenobiology has been groundbreaking. I can establish contact, Kai offered practically. We've collaborated on several papers regarding archaeological preservation in high-pressure environments. The planning continued with remarkable efficiency, transportation arrangements, coordination of research data, tactical assessments of potential opposition. Throughout this process, Ben noticed a subtle but significant shift in the group dynamic. The women in his life, once connected primarily through their association with him, now formed a professional network based on mutual respect for each other's expertise. Alina's nanite research complemented Hope's magical knowledge, which in turn enhanced Ester's thermal science understanding, creating connections independent of their shared history with Ben. Even Julie, not yet present but already incorporated into their planning, fit naturally into this evolving collaborative framework. As they finalized preparations for the journey to the Marianas Trench, Ben felt the Omnitrix pulse with what he interpreted as satisfaction. The nanite integration had completed successfully. Technological authentication achieved through cooperation rather than conquest. The celestial key continued its evolution, as did Ben himself, not merely through physical or technological transformation, but through the growing understanding that the power he wielded was meant to connect rather than separate, to integrate rather than dominate. The concept aligned perfectly with the ancest raw wisdom shared through the thermal meditation. Transformation is a path to understanding rather than merely a means to power. Each new spectrum authentication would bring them closer to the archive, and the knowledge it contained about the approaching alignment and the mysterious schism. But it would also bring Ben closer to the threshold Elena had described, the point where integration might become irreversible, where the distinction between wielder and technology might become philosophical rather than physical. That decision point remained ahead, a choice to be made with the wisdom gathered through each step of their journey. For now, the technological spectrum was complete, nanite integration achieved through cooperation and understanding rather than forced assimilation. As they prepared to depart for the ocean depths and the gravitational anomalies waiting there, Ben felt the Omnitrix pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, no longer a device attached to his wrist but increasingly an extension of his being. A partner in evolution rather than merely a tool for transformation. The nanite integration was complete. The technological authentication achieved. The path to the archive continued to unfold before them, one spectrum at a time. Chapter 3 End.